Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Metro Inner Development Assessment Panel. I declare the meeting open at 9:34 a.m. and acknowledge we're hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respect to elders past, present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters and community. This meeting will be run in accordance with our DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the DAP Regulations 2011. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of the DAP Regulations. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce our members participating today. My name is Dale Page. I'm presiding member today. In the room with me and to my left, we have Francesca Lefanti, Deputy Presiding Member, John Syme, Specialist Member, Councillor Andrew Sullivan from the City of Fremantle, and Councillor Ingrid Van Dawson from the City of Fremantle. Item 2, apologies. We have nil, and members of on leave of absence also nil. Item 4, noting of minutes. Minutes of all previous meetings are available on the DAP website. Moving now to Part B of our agenda, the City of Fremantle. The first item, item 1, is declaration of due consideration. Panel members need to have considered all the documentation within Part B of the agenda and the Part B related information, noting that an R13 direction response was published on the 29th of July 2025. Could I please confirm by a show of hands that members have considered all information? Thank you. Item 2, disclosures of interest. 2 disclosures of interest have been received. Councillor Ingrid Van Dawson has disclosed an impartiality interest on the basis that she worked with the applicant Alessandro Stagno at Planning Solutions from 2018 to 2021, but has had no ongoing contact since that time. The DAP Executive Director has considered this declaration and is comfortable that the nature of this interest is appropriately categorised as impartiality interest and is not of a magnitude that could give rise to a reasonable apprehension that Councillor Van Dawson may be biased and so unable to bring an impartial mind to the deliberations of the meeting. As a result, the Executive Director has decided that Councillor Van Dawson is able to participate in the matter. Councillor Andrew Sullivan has also disclosed an impartiality interest on the basis that he participated in a prior council meeting in relation to the application. Councillor Van Dawson, you were not at that council meeting?
I was not.
Okay, great. I note the standing declaration of interest that if the agenda items have been considered at a council meeting, the local government DAP members acknowledge that they are not bound by any previous council decisions and resolutions, and that they undertake to exercise independent judgment in relation to the matters before them. Consequently, I've decided that this impartiality interest will not prevent Councillor Sullivan from participating or voting in relation to the DAP application at this meeting. No other disclosures of interest have been received to this point. Do any members wish to make any other declarations of interest in relation to this item? No? All right, let's move on then to item 3 on our agenda, Form 1 DAP applications. We have one item today, item 3.1, lots 27, 29, 300 and 301, which is number 234 South Terrace, South Fremantle, motor vehicle wash development, DAP number 24/02818. We have 10 presentations on this item today. We have presentations from Dr. Georgia Hinks speaking against the application, from Ian Kerr speaking against the application, Stephen Hodgkin against the application, John Chevelle against the application, Sarah Frochter against the application, Adam Flynn against the application. Then from the applicant team, we have Alessandro Stagno from Apex Planning, Benin Boardbar, Transcore, Richard and Joyce, is that all right? Yes. From Shawmac, and Brian McCubbing from Glowmark nominees. I believe they are also accompanied by George Watt from Herring Storer, who will be available for questions. Presenters, I remind you that in accordance with clause 4A2 of our DAP standing orders, presentations are limited to 3 minutes. Because of the number of presentations we have today, we've not granted any extensions of time. We have read everything that you have submitted to us, so I encourage you to focus on the key points you wish to get across within your 3-minute time frame. When you get to your 3 minutes, I will let you know that your time is up and I will ask you to wrap up. Unfortunately, we've had a couple of incidents in recent times that require me to remind everyone in attendance that it's important to extend due courtesy and respect to the DAP and other participants within the meeting, creating a disturbance by interrupting or interfering with the proceedings, using offensive language, making aspersions or making statements that anyone involved is incompetent or dishonest will not be tolerated. We will begin with the first presentation. I believe Georgia Hinks is online. Dr. Hinks, are you there? Can you hear us, Dr. Hinks? We can't hear you, unfortunately. We can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Turning off the microphone.
It's a microphone, it's on it. Yeah, do you want to move to Ian and then Dr. Hinks, I think what we will do is we will allow you some time to try and resolve your sound issue, and we will move on with some of the other presenters and we'll come back to you. Is that okay? All right. We will move ahead with Ian Kerr. Your 3 minutes starts when you are ready.
Right. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm a resident of South Fremantle. I'm also a transport planner with 45 years experience and was a councillor for an inner metro local government for 14 years. Now, you'll be very used to receiving objections to proposed developments on the basis that they represent overdevelopment of a site or location. What is striking about the response, not just my response to this proposal, is the number of submissions that argue it is effectively underdevelopment of a property in a prime location and failure to achieve the development potential of the site. There are a great many other reasons which have been extensively covered in the 81 submissions against the proposal why this is an inappropriate development for the site. And I note also that many of the 81 submissions opposing the development are substantial. Conversely, all but 2 of the 10 supportive submissions were just a few lines. In the local planning scheme, a car wash is not an as-of-right use for the site, and approval would require exercising discretion to do so. In other words, there must be exceptional reasons for approving a car wash in this location. Although the site is zoned mixed use, it is in fact surrounded almost completely by residential properties, or to the south, a mixed-use property with 8 residential units. A vehicle wash for a residential area is an ex or not permitted use. In addition, the site is one of the most accessible locations by bus, walking or cycling in the inner Fremantle area, with high-frequency buses to Murdoch University and Fiona Stanley Hospital, as well as Fremantle itself. It also has a high level of accessibility by proximity, given the number of retail, hospitality and other businesses within easy walking distance. If we can't get innovative medium density housing at a location like this, I struggle to see how targets or expectations for increased population in inner Fremantle are likely to be achievable. At the very least, this would set an helpful precedent. The City of Fremantle's Strategic Community Plan 2024 to 2034 sees Fremantle as a livable city with sustainable growth in city centre population. It is difficult to see how the current proposal is consistent with what is termed growth in city centre population. The site is, of course, privately owned, so Fremantle or even state government has limited ability to direct, but it can encourage appropriate development. MIDAP can support strategic planning objectives by not supporting discretionary development that goes against those objectives.
You're at time.
I urge you, therefore, to refuse this development application. Thank you.
Wonderful, close to time. Thank you very much. Members, I'd like to check if anyone has any questions of this presenter. Councillor Sullivan, do you have questions of this presenter?
Yeah, I did have one, just in relation to, I guess, amenity in the scheme requiring no detrimental impacts on amenity to adjoining owners as well as residential properties. You mentioned residential properties. Do you consider, what impact would you consider this would have on the businesses that are also adjoining in that area?
There are two businesses immediately adjoining on South Terrace, and they rely heavily on pedestrian activity along the street. So I think there would be two main impacts. One would be on the amenity of the pedestrian environment, with a fairly large number of vehicles entering and particularly exiting onto South Terrace, immediately adjacent to those two businesses. But there's also the fact that it is a very busy and complex intersection with a lot of bus movements, which take up a lot of space in that, and adding to that would probably detract from the attractiveness of any businesses in the area.
Thank you. Councillor Van Dawson, any questions of this presenter?
Not from me, thank you.
Other panel members, questions?
Not from me, thank you.
Mr. Kerr, I have one, if you would indulge me. You've made a statement that the proposal is an underutilised, I think you used the word substantial underutilisation of a site. Now that may well be, but I just wanted to check your understanding that unless the city's planning scheme restricts the uses for this site more than it does currently, or applies minimum requirements in terms of height and so on, that a panel could not reasonably refuse an application based on what it is not. And I just wanted to check your understanding of that.
Yes, I understand that. My concern is there is an element of discretion for approval that would be required, and I don't believe this application meets that threshold.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to our next presenter. I'm not sure that we have Dr. Hinks online.
Can you hear me now?
Can, Dr. Hinks, we can't see you though.
Do you need to see? Okay, I'll try and.
We don't need to see you.
You don't need to see me. No, definitely don't. Okay,
right.
Shall I start now?
Off you go.
Okay, I think there's a danger to life at the intersection. The intersection adjacent to the proposed motor vehicle wash is one of the most heavily used entry points to the city of Fremantle. The motor vehicle car wash will cause increasing cars crossing the pavements, which are used in a heavily pedestrianised locality. Pedestrians walk back and forth from South Fremantle to access schools and shops. This includes primary school children on small bicycles on pavements, which will be crossed by cars exiting the car wash. Residents from the apartment block adjacent to the proposed car wash will have hindered views when exiting the building from increased cars on the pavement exiting the car wash. Residents exiting from Gold Street onto South Terrace will have limited opportunity to exit the street, turning right and left due to traffic exiting the car wash. Traffic entering the proposed car wash from South Street will be turning just as the traffic is approaching lights and lanes merge from one lane to two. Again, very dangerous intersection. Car wash is more suitable to light industrial area than a heavily pedestrianised and residential community, with a local cafe at the corner of Gold Street and South Terrace, increasing the number of pedestrians. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hinks. Councillor Sullivan, any questions of this presenter? Go ahead.
No, I'm right.
No? Councillor Van Dawson?
No, thank you.
No? Any other panel members?
No, thank you.
Dr. Hinks, I have a quick question if you don't mind. I just wonder, given the mixed use zoning of the site, do you not think that whatever the site might be developed with may generate that traffic movement and the similar concerns to pedestrian safety that you have raised, and perhaps some uses which may even be permitted uses may generate even more than what are being proposed with this application? Is that something that you've considered?
I could absolutely answer that. I have lived in this locality for 30 years. We've never had a problem with that site. It was a boat yard, never had any problem with that whatsoever. Now it's a training site for some sort of forklift trucks or something like that. No problem at all, no increase in traffic. This car wash is at an absolute next level of traffic flowing in and out. And also, because it was 24 hours, it will attract unsocial behaviour like the petrol station does at the corner of South Street and Hampton Road. It is absolutely not suited for this type of tiny streets and residential area that it's proposed for. I've lived here 30 years and I know exactly what sort of traffic and how many accidents are on that corner, and also the amount of pedestrians, especially with that cafe kerfuffle, which flow onto the pavement. So unless you've lived here for 30 years, I don't think you really know, but I have.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hinks. Our next presenter is Stephen Hodgkin. I think we have Stephen online. Hello,
Hi.
Stephen. Your 3 minutes starts when you are ready.
Thank you for your time. Good morning. I live right next door to the site of this proposed car wash, and having attended the City of Fremantle's council meeting on 9th July, I appreciate that the responsible authority unanimously rejected this proposal with not a single councillor voting to approve the development. I also appreciate that the council unanimously passed a further motion to formally not support the proposal for reasons described in today's agenda. I'm against this facility that barely meets the noise regulations, and when it theoretically does, according to the acoustic reports, this is only when everything works perfectly. I'm not an expert on this topic, and I do appreciate that there is a representative of Herring Store in attendance today, but to me, their acoustic report seems quite optimistic. So firstly, with every mitigation in place, the modeled nighttime level on the west side is exactly the 41 decibel legal limit. So I'm looking at tables 6.2 and 6.3 of page 6 of their acoustic assessments in Appendix 4, or page 52 of today's agenda. It seems there's no margin for error in this calculation, that one extra noise or minor fault tips it into breach. Furthermore, my understanding is that this 41 decibels already includes a blanket 5 decibel for penalty for possible tonality, yet the report has no data on the actual noise signature of the vacuums or wash motors, and I question whether a measured tonal components further breach this limit. Furthermore, the plan requires that roller doors be closed throughout every wash. To me, a single jam door, power failure, or driver who disables the sensor instantly removes this assumption and takes the plant over the noise limit. I also note the model accounts for car door slams under impulsivity, but it seemingly admits that queuing vehicles also generates loud exhausts, booming stereos, revving of engines, and loud call horns, as the previous speaker noted, just antisocial behavior. Finally, no vibration study accompanies the application. So can we verify that the low frequency vibration from compressors, pumps, and vacuums will not propagate as required under Clause 67B of the planning regulations? In other words, a 0 decibel safety margin and a 0 tolerance for mechanical or human error. Yet the development application also states, looking at page 129 of today's agenda, but also their application planning approval, page 6, they state, and I quote, The motor vehicle wash will generally be unmanned with staff attending periodically for routine maintenance. An unmanned facility cannot adequately address a roller door that is stuck open. An unmanned facility cannot adequately address noisy patrons or that aging pumps won't drift above their as-new sound rating. Once this site is built, enforcement likely falls upon the officers and rangers of the City of Fremantle. The Supreme Court's decision in Sharon Property v. JDAP in 2022 is one example where we can discount optimistic acoustic modeling and adopt stricter assumptions where residents' amenity is at risk. I respectfully urge you, as the responsible authority suggests, to refuse this application on acoustic and vibration grounds, or at least defer the item pending an independent peer review that demonstrates a real, fail-safe margin, not theoretical compliance balanced on a knife edge. Residents living here deserve more than the minimum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions of this presenter. Councillor Sullivan, any questions?
Yeah, it sounds like you're reasonably familiar with the noise regulations. The influencing factors that the consultants have suggested for that area include things like the commercial uses in the area. Are the other commercial uses in the area generating levels of noise that you've noticed? And are they generating them at all times of the day, or are they limited to certain times of the day?
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. That's a great point there. I think so. On the first point, the current uses do not create that much noise. I think, as the previous presenter mentioned, it used to be a boatyard, and now it's a training facility. They don't seem to be that active, and when they are active, they seem to be quite reasonable and within noise limits. And then secondly, they operate on a normal 9 to 5 kind of operation, whereas this proposed car wash was initially suggested 24/7, but is now until, I can't remember the time, whether it was 10 o'clock or 7 o'clock, but again, nighttime operation at the limits.
Thank you. Councillor Van Dawson, any questions?
None from me.
Any other panel member questions of this presenter? No?
No.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Next presenter is John Chevelle. John, do we have you online? We can see you, but we can't hear you yet.
Okay, you can hear me now. Okay.
Absolutely, away you go.
Yeah, thank you, DAP, for letting me speak for 3 minutes. Look, I'm a resident of South Terrace, but to be honest, I'm not, I'm down the end of South Terrace, so my property value is not going to be affected. I'm not going to be affected by the noise or anything like that. But I did feel quite compelled to speak to the committee because I think if this went ahead, it would be a really bad planning outcome. And my main reason for that is that I think my view is that it's really difficult to create a successful mixed-use area, and the South Terrace precinct is already sort of developing and has a strong sort of mixed-use experience, and that's because you've got businesses which work with each other. One business attracts business for another business, and the residents use those businesses. It attracts people into the area who hopefully walk or catch the bus or drive, but use multiple businesses. So cultivating that sort of cohabitation, I think, is really critical. It would get done organically, but I think it does need the assistance of planners to make sure it sort of continues on that path. I think this business, from my perspective, provides no service to the precinct. There are plenty of other car washes in the vicinity. 4 minutes away, you've got a selection of 2 car washes, and also the nature of the facility. You drive there, you sit in your car, it gets cleaned, you drive away. It does not encourage people connecting with the area, going out, buying stuff, having a coffee, sitting in a restaurant, and creating that environment. So I think all that, the nature of the business specifically, you could put anything there. The nature of this business specifically detracts from the ecosystem of South Terrace. I read through the responsible officer's recommendation and strongly endorse it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sullivan, questions?
No, right.
Councillor Van Dawson?
No, not
No.
for me.
Any other panel member? I have a quick question for you. I just wanted to check, you've made a comment in your deputation that the proposed development isn't a service that's sought by the community. So I just wanted to check, community need is always a tricky thing because there's many components of community need. And I just wanted to check with you what you base that comment on, what your knowledge is of the need of the community, and by community, who would you include in that definition?
Okay. Well, yeah, okay, two answers to that. I mean, the first one is, that's from my perspective, from my own interests. I haven't surveyed the community, but I did, in one of my earliest submissions to the council, I did sort of ask the councillors. I wasn't expecting a response, but I sort of asked the council, like how many requests had they had from constituents for a car wash in their area, among all the services they could possibly ask for from council. And I didn't get a response, but my expectation was that it's not something people are asking for. I did ask the question. I didn't get an answer. I probably wasn't expecting an answer, but that's the basis of my view.
That's all good. Thank you very much for that clarification.
Thank you.
Next presenter we have is Sarah Proctor. Do we have Sarah online? Hi, Sarah.
Hey.
Can you hear us?
Yeah. Hey. Good morning. Thanks for your time, everyone. From someone who calls South Terrace home, I wanted to ask us to consider together whether the best usage for this iconic heritage-listed South Terrace to South Street corner is really a car wash. Is this really the best we can do on a primarily located Soulfield street, so connected to public transport and local Freo businesses? The report for the proposed development concedes that it would require new crossovers on the South Street, South Terrace signals. It also states the superwash will yield an extra 216 vehicle movements per day. I live right next to this spot, and those left in, left out rules are not enforceable. Drivers are still going to attempt right turns, interrupting the footpath used by hundreds of pedestrians, using the bus stops, parents and school children on their way to school, and hospital staff on their way to work. Schedule 2, Clause 67N of the Planning and Development Regulations in 2015, also known as the amenity tests, asks whether a proposal would detract from the character of locality. Again, I wanted to consider whether a 1.8 metre concrete screen and queuing cars set 6 metres behind the building line detracts from our beloved boutique Main Street. It's not very South Freo, is it? The site falls within the South Freo Heritage Area also. The responsible authority's heritage officer notes the car wash building is not fully consistent with LPP 3.6, which is also page 74 of today's agenda. A concrete panel shed, murals aside, cannot conserve places of heritage significance as required by the local planning scheme for Clause 1.6 F and G. The local planning scheme 4's mixed-use objectives call for upper-level housing and development not detrimental to the amenity of adjoining owners. This 1,321 metre squared block is within 200 metres of more than 600 daily buses and a 10-minute walk to the Freo markets. A modest 3-storey infill similar to the neighbouring 240 South Terrace could deliver 10 to 15 dwellings, permanent customers for local traders, and quadruple the rate space without a single curb cut. Approving a car wash sterilises that opportunity for decades. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Councillor Sullivan, any questions?
Yeah, when you just used the word sterilisation of the precinct, do you consider that the activity actually blights the capacity of the precinct in that area to, I guess, serve the neighbourhood community, which is what it's meant to do as part of a mixed-use zone?
I don't think I'm fully equipped to answer that question, so I'll pass, thanks.
Yeah, so blighting as in has a detrimental impact on the ability for other activities to flourish?
Yeah, I believe it would be detrimental.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Van Dawson.
Nothing from me. Thank
Any
you.
other panel members have questions for this presenter?
Nothing from me.
No. Thank you very much for your time today. We now have Adam Flynn online. Are you there, Adam?
Hello.
Flynn
Just,
and his support team online.
Just juggling a bit today.
We understand.
Thank you so much, panel.
Over to you, Adam.
Okay, great. Look, my submission is it's not open to the panel to approve this development application because it really clearly does not meet the objectives of mixed use zone. It's really clear in the local planning laws that a development cannot be detrimental to the amenity of adjoining owners of residential properties in the locality. And it's so clear on the applicant's own evidence that this application would be detrimental to the amenity. I think Stephen did a really great job of looking at the noise report, and I want to touch on that as well. So we know that the tribunal has had numerous decisions where they say compliance with the noise regs does not necessarily mean that noise does not constitute an adverse impact on the existing amenity of the locality. The noise that this car wash is proposing to meet is so loud, it's just legal. Any louder and it would be an unlawful admission under the regs. So it's so loud. I think to contextualise that, one vacuum cleaner is at 80 decibels, according to report. I looked up the stats on my leaf blower, and that's at 80 decibels as well. So that's I'm really conscious about when I use my leaf blower because it's, I want to be a good neighbour and not make so much sound. So I think it's really clearly detrimental in terms of noise and also pedestrian safety, which has been touched on before. And I know that this is a discretionary approval, so the committee needs to kind of consider if it's a good idea. And I just want to kind of paint a bit of a picture so you understand the area. Now, it is, there is traffic and there is noise in the area during the day, but something really beautiful happens in this intersection when Fremantle quietens down. You get in the evenings and on kind of the weekends a bit later and all through the night, the area is as quiet as a mouse. When Freo slows down, this intersection basically turns into a quiet residential street. If this development application would go ahead, it would draw traffic in and draw noise. Just on the noise report as well, I know there's no mention of the noise of parked cars, and there's provision for up to 12 cars to be weighted, presumably with their engines running. So I think it's definitely some questions there. So with regard to pedestrians as well, and kind of to think about this zone, we can sit on our front veranda directly across from the car wash, and on a weekend there's a stream of pedestrians. It's kind of like, when you're going to the footy or something and there's that huge amount of foot traffic. There's that going up and down the strip all the time. And if this proposal went ahead, cars would be forced with the design of the wall at the front and the building next door to encroach onto the footpath so they could see oncoming traffic and block off that pedestrian access. So it's a disaster waiting to happen. I'd encourage the panel to think, is this going to improve the area? And if the answer is no, then you should not approve. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adam. Councillor Sullivan, any questions? And also, no, any other panel members' questions? No questions at this time. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right, we will now move to some people. I think we have them in the room. We've got 4 presentations from different people on the applicant team. What I propose is I'm going to allow you to all run through your presentations, and then the panel will have the opportunity to ask you questions of the team as a whole. Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Thank you. First, we have Alessandro Stagno from Apex Planning.
Yeah, sorry. Just a moment so we can get ourselves ready. Thank you very much, Presiding Member. Good morning, panel members. I'm the applicant of the motor vehicle wash proposed at 234 South Terrace, joined by Mr. Brian McCubbin, the landowner and proponent, Ben Boardbar and Richard Joyce, the project traffic engineers, who will all be making deputations after myself. We also have Jeff Harris from Herring Store Acoustics available on Zoom to answer any questions regarding the acoustic assessment. We're collectively speaking in support of the development, and we support the officer recommendation for approval, which is at the back of the RAR. The supportive recommendation put forward by the City of Fremantle's officers is underpinned by a thorough and technical town planning and heritage assessment, and is the culmination of months of collaboration in which our team refined and improved the proposal to a point where it could be deemed worthy to be approved by the city staff. My remit this morning is to explain why this land use and development is appropriate for the subject site. I'll start with the mixed-use zoning under the city's local planning scheme number 4. A close look at the nature of the city's mixed-use zone in the scheme text shows that it's intended to be a flexible zone covering a broad range of potential land uses. If this were not the case, the uses of motor vehicle wash, light industry, motor vehicle repair and service station would not be capable of consideration as discretionary uses. Instead, they would be X uses. And to further this point, the use of warehouse/storage, which by definition allows the storage of goods, equipment, plant and materials both indoors and outdoors, is a P permitted use in the mixed-use zone. The location of land allocated to mixed-use zone throughout the municipality tells a similar story. For example, 4 of the 5 existing car wash sites throughout the city of Fremantle, as outlined on page 12 of the RAR, also find themselves on land which is zoned mixed use. I'm not saying any of those car washes were approved while the land was zoned mixed use, but what I am saying is that clearly some land allocated as mixed use under the scheme happens to be in locations which have high traffic volumes, with frontage to higher order roads and have characteristics that can viably accommodate those car-based uses that I outlined earlier, including a car wash. The case is no different here. Current traffic data shows that South Terrace carries around 8,900 vehicles per day and clearly has a significant car-based element to its established character and function. It's highlighted in the RAR that the subject site has historically accommodated commercial uses, which I would say were reflective of its interface and frontage to key high traffic roads. What this proposal seeks to do is redevelop an existing and very dated commercial site with a new and more appropriately designed commercial use, which will provide a genuine service to the community and existing vehicular patronage on its frontage roads. Before I hand over to Benham, the final item I'll clarify is the result of the acoustic assessment, noting the comments of one of the previous objectors, Mr. Hodgkin. Jeff Harris will be able to talk to the technical aspects of his acoustic assessment during question time, but it's important that I note the acoustic assessment actually shows that noise generated by the car wash falls well below the maximum assigned levels at almost every receiver, as indicated under table 6.3 of the acoustic report. Where Mr. Hodgkin has raised the 41 decibel compliant level, this relates to receivers on the western side of South Terrace. It's essential to recognise that in real world terms, noise in the realm of around 40 decibels falls within the quiet range of noise levels based on the WAPC's own examination of typical noise levels.
Alessandra, so I'll ask you to wrap up. I'm sure we'll have questions.
No problem. I'll just hand that over to Ben, no problem.
Thank you. Ben Boardbar, over to you.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Madam Presiding Member, panel members and officers. I will be speaking in support of the development. I'll just focus on the matters related to traffic engineering and road safety, although my colleague Richard will specifically focus on road safety. I think it's important to note that all the assessments which has been undertaken by the applicant consultant has not been disproven, if you like, by the officers. The officers have not taken any assessment, and I maintain that what is expressed is an opinion by the officers, which was not based on specific traffic engineering and road safety expertise. Once you look at these matters, you have to follow a certain path, do your assessment within a certain framework which has been set. And that framework indicates that this development will not cause any congestion. If no congestion is caused, there will not be any queuing. If queuing is not there, there will not be any risks. And none of those matters have been refuted. The other point that I think was raised, and Madam Presiding Member, you picked on that point, that no matter what development occurs on this site, some of the issues which has been identified by the officers also equally apply to any other development of this site. As commercial and retail development goes, the car wash is not a high generator of traffic. It's a very low generator of traffic. Its movements is not concentrated within a specific peak hour, like a retail outlet, typical retail outlet, or an office development or a residential development. The traffic movements is spread throughout the day. And that is reflected obviously in analysis. So from a traffic movements point of view, there are no issues. Now, the adjacent signalized intersection, a few things was said earlier that this development would be a danger to life, and the intersection is a very busy and complex intersection. None of those points are actually factual. This signalized intersection is not complex. It's a very simple signalized intersection. There aren't, relatively speaking, significant levels of traffic going through it.
You are on time, Mr. Walker.
Yes, so I just want to conclude that there are no issues in terms of traffic. I'll pass on to my colleague, Richard.
Thank you. Richard
Thank you,
Joyce.
Bennett. Thank you, panel, for allowing me to speak, and I am going to speak in support of this application. My background is road safety and traffic. I'm 35 years principal consultant engineer for Fremantle Traffic and Safety, and I deal in road safety every day of the week. So I have to not normalise it, but I understand it, and I apply risk principles and actual analysis to perform those road safety techniques. On that, as Benham said, there was talk about the high-risk nature of this intersection. Benham touched on the fact that it is a simple four-way intersection, signalised, carrying 8,900 vehicles. Over a 5-year period, there were 16 recorded crashes on Main Road's website, which ranked this intersection at number 947 across the state, which is relatively low for this type of intersection for the number of crashes. The predominant crash type is rear-enders, which are on the approach to the intersection, not on the exit to the intersection, with 9 rear-end crashes, which is normal, again, for this type of intersection, and expected for this type of layout and the volumes that we have. The further crash types, we have a couple of sideswipe crashes relating to people in the 2 lanes as they go through, not to the crossovers. We have 2 right angles, again at the intersection, not related to the crossovers. And we have one which is classed as an other, and 2 right through crashes, which means one of the vehicles was travelling through and one turned across it. Again, relating to the intersection, not crossovers. So I wanted to make it clear there is no pedestrian crashes, there is no pedestrian injuries, there has been no fatalities through this intersection. It would not be classed as a high-risk intersection related to road safety. It would, as I say, ranked 947 for the state. And so I just want to not normalise it, but in my job, I have to normalise things to pick the areas where the worst intersections are. And for example, the highest ranked intersection in Perth is Reed and Erindale. It carries 277 crashes over the 5-year period. So in relation to that, 16 at rank 947 shows the nature of the traffic through there, and the new development will add minimal traffic, which will likely show any increase in this. So we always look over a longer period when we do traffic analysis and crash analysis. So that 5 years is a normal period that you would look. And I'm comfortable that the type of application the traffic generated would not increase the road safety risk at this location.
Thank you. Spot on time. Thank you, Mr. Joyce. Brian McCubbing, over to you.
Thank you, panel. I make the following observations. The existing site's been commercial for 20 years plus. At the moment, it's got a 1.8 metre cyclone fence around it, a pothole bitumen surface, and a 60s or 70s style showroom. There is no heritage in that. The northern side wall of the apartment building to the south is a solid wall. There is no fenestration whatsoever. There are existing crossovers on both South Street and South Terrace. They've been there for a very long time. They were designed for full turn movement, and nothing in the roads prevents full turn movement at this stage. Next point, Fremantle, South Fremantle of an evening, when you want to frequent it, there's many restaurants, Rocco's, etc. It's not easy to find a park. Most of the people who live in the area park in the street. We have 5 car washes. From experience, we know that most of the customers within 1.5 to 2.5 kilometres of the site, and it's fully automated, but we will have a staff member there from about 9 till 5 every day. So it's not unmanned. The technology of the business, the industry has changed dramatically. We've got doors on other sites. We've never had a jammed door, and if we do, we get notification electronically. The site will be surveilled by CCTV as we do all of our other sites. We've had no recorded crash events on any of the other sites, including one on the very busy Canning Highway in Mount Pleasant next to the Shell near Canning Bridge. From a planning policy 4.2.2 on sustainability provides that jobs and business for sustainability should be provided in a local sense. This provides employment, but also provides a service to all the cars parked on the street that in Sydney and Melbourne aren't allowed to wash their vehicles in a driveway or on the street. And from a traffic point of view, we will not be generating a huge amount of traffic. We know it from across our other 5 sites. So we think operationally it is satisfactory. From an alternative point of view for the site, a private property owner has a right to have a use that is viable on the site. At the moment, there are 10,000 apartments in Perth approved, but not being built. Banks will only finance Multiplex, who have said they won't be building any more apartments in the next 3 years because of government infrastructure work. And there's 2 tier 2 builders that can build anything above about 4 stories. So you can't even get finance for them at the moment, let alone a builder to build them, unless you're Jerry Hansen and Finbar and their alliance. So from that point of view, it's all very well to say you can build it, but they're costing 13,000 plus a square metre to build, up to 20,000. The sale price doesn't even match it, and it wouldn't be viable.
You're at time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for all those presentations from the applicant team. I'm now going to ask members if they have questions of the applicant team. Councillor Sullivan.
Yes, thank you. The traffic assessments that the team have done are based on movements that allow for exits, both egress and access with right turn movements. The city is clearly stating that their intention is to prohibit that, and they have the potential or the right to put islands, median islands in. Have you done an assessment as to how this operation would, what impacts this operation would have in the event that the city puts those islands in, basically restricting movement to left turn in and left turn out?
Could I, I'm sorry it's out of convention, but one thing I neglected to mention, after consultation with the city, we would be prepared, the hours at the moment are 6:30 to 10:30, we would be prepared to accept 7 to 10, and if left in, left out can be, we would agree to that as a movement.
Thank you, Mr. McCubbing. That'll probably come to you as a question.
Sorry.
That's all right.
The short answer is no. The left in, left out crossover will basically have a minimal impact on the traffic flow. One of the issues with the offices was the right turn movements. So our focus basically during the discussions with the officers was to try to address their concerns, which was mainly associated with the right turn movements. Now, what we've established that even the right turn movements, which are potentially problematic will have adequate capacity and will not create any congestion in queuing. Now, if you take the right turn movements out of the equation and you end up with just left in and left out, you will virtually won't have any issues whatsoever, and it's going to operate satisfactorily.
Can I just, before we move off the right turn movement issue, so we're still on that. So your requested amendments to condition 10 would effectively allow customers travelling east along South Street to turn right into the site, and it will allow customers exiting the site to turn right onto South Terrace. Yeah. I'm not a traffic expert, but I was out there on the weekend and drove past the site. I had a view at that point on the matter and somewhat substantiated in the information provided in the city's R13 response. It looked to me that there is a bit of risk. So not congestion, you've mentioned congestion now, but it looked like there might be a bit of risk associated with right turn movement into the site off South Terrace, especially so close to the light. So can you, I guess this is your opportunity to convince us otherwise, can you comment on that?
Sure. So just before you start, Ben, if I could just come in there. So I believe the amendments that we've requested are for all inward movements from South Street and then all exit movements from South Terrace. So the right turn in movement would be from South Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the movement I'm talking about.
Okay, so
there are risks associated with movement, full stop. So as Richard mentioned, and he will elaborate no doubt, the question is that are those risks unacceptable to a level which are detrimental, and therefore those movements should not be present. Now, our view is that the risk become generally through congestion. So if a vehicle wants to turn right in and there is no space for the vehicle who want to travel east to bypass that vehicle, that creates a risk of rear-end crashes as alluded by officers. That is not the case in this instance. The eastbound movement, and I have provided a plan in my written submission, is that if a vehicle is waiting to turn right in, the through movements can comfortably bypass that vehicle. So even though it's not marked as two lane, the width is adequate to operate as two lane. So that would reduce that risk. So it comes down to the risks that you have. Are they acceptable? Are they so unacceptable to a level that will cause the panel to make judgment on that? So our view is that the risk is low and minimal.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that, please?
Yep.
You've got in your figure 3, it is in your transport plan, you've got some peak hour right turn movements in and out, which is 7 peak hour AM, PM, 7 right-hand turns in, 7 right-hand turns out. How does that relate to the traffic in the intersection itself? I mean, are we talking about 50% of the traffic in the intersection or 2% of the traffic in the intersection? Or I don't know about that.
Don't know top of my head, but my guess would be that those numbers would be 0.0, maybe another 0, a number percent, or 0.0, a number percent. So those numbers are very, very low. So
roughly, if we've got 8,900 vehicles going up South Terrace, the AM peak numbers would be
about rule of thumb is about 10%. So it'd be about 900 to 1,000 peak hour traffic. So we got 7. Okay. So 7 is one almost every 10 minutes. Almost every 10 minutes.
Thank you. Back to Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, and I just wanted to pick up while you were talking about that, the right turn movement in from South Street and the ability for vehicles to slip on the inside and get past that vehicle that might be stopped there because there's a queue of cars waiting at the lights. I'm just wondering if you've taken into account the bus movements that go through that area. As a person that drives through that intersection every day, there are almost always a bus doing a left turn from South Terrace into South Street. And the configuration of the road means that they actually, to do that turn, they actually take up all of the lanes in South Terrace to swing around that very tight intersection, which puts them on the very right-hand edge of the lane. And I can't see how they would then manage to then slip onto the inside of a vehicle waiting to turn right, which then, of course, creates a backup at the intersection. You mentioned rear-enders being a significant crash scenario in that environment, or at least the main one. I don't want to say significant. Yeah, so I apologise. So it's not significant, but it's the main one of the stats that you're talking about. So how do you account for what happens when, you know, buses go through that intersection, which is, as I've said, almost probably 1 out of every second time I'm at that intersection, there is a bus trying to turn left?
Sure. The movement that you refer to from South Terrace into South Street does not affect the development crossovers at all. The right turn in movement that we are talking about is on South Street, and you are on the other lane. So even if a bus is turning left from South Street into South Terrace,
the other way around. South Terrace into South Street.
From South Terrace into, so that's left from north into west, is that
no,
to the east?
Heading south, then heading east. Heading south and South Terrace, heading east, which is the main bus route going up South Street.
Okay, that movement, you are suggesting that the buses, because of the tightness of the corner, which happens in a lot of inner city areas, they have to swing wide and almost use all the pavement space to turn left. Now, go back to the risk and the probability of conflict occurring when the bus makes that left-hand movement for a right-turning vehicle not being able to turn right into the site. As we mentioned, we are estimating that right turn movement is 1 every 10 minutes. Now, the frequency of the buses during the peak hour is such that there would be several buses come and make those left turns when there is no vehicle waiting to turn right in. In the event that there is a vehicle waiting to turn right in, my view is that there is enough space available, enough length is available for when the bus turns, be able to swing towards the north and bypass the waiting traffic. Those buses have got very, very good turning radiuses. The angle on the wheel is quite significant. We model those and simulate those movements all the time. So my guess is, my answer to your question is, one, that probability is low, but in the event that that probability occurs, the bus should be able still to bypass. And if it doesn't, the eastbound traffic has been held at the signal if those buses are allowed to turn left. So there is no eastbound traffic coming. Again, you have to connect all the dots together to see what that complete picture is going to look like. So I do not see any significant risk associated with that potential conflict.
Okay, so just following on for that, I'll try not to be argumentative, but
well, it's question time, Councillor.
Question time, that's right. So just to clarify what you've said, I mean, you said it should be able to get through. Have you actually modelled the turning movements of buses, articulated buses in that environment? And also, can you speak to, you said the accidents that occurred are typically a rear-ender type accident. If a bus suddenly stops in that scenario, in other words, it's just made a turn and then stops, and then everybody else is assuming that the flow of traffic is fine, and then suddenly a car behind the bus trying to turn left as well stops, is that not going to generate the level of confusion that actually causes accidents? Because it's not something that people would expect to suddenly have a scenario where they can't either turn left or they can't even move through the intersection when they were expecting to be able to, because it's a green light.
Sure. Short answer is no, and I'll explain. First of all, as I did mention, when the bus make that left turn, there is no eastbound traffic.
I'm talking about southbound traffic behind it.
No, southbound traffic
behind the bus, it's got a green light.
Well, the southbound traffic is traveling south.
Yes.
That's not affected. So you are talking about the southbound traffic that wants to turn left at the intersection.
Or move straight through.
Well, move straight through is not blocked because
but what if the bus stops?
No, the bus has turned. There is enough distance between the crossover and the point of the turn, so the bus would not be in the middle of the intersection. The bus would have turned and cleared the intersection.
And then stopped.
So it's not affecting the southbound traffic.
I won't pursue don't feel like.
You can raise that in debate if you would.
And also, it's important to say when that bus is stopped, there is a gap between the left-hand side of the bus to the inner curve. So the left-turning light vehicles can still bypass that stop bus, because as I mentioned, that width of the line is equivalent to 2 lanes. It's not 1 lane. It's not marked, but it's equivalent to 2 lanes. That lane, eastbound lane, is very wide. Richard, you want to make something?
I would just like to make a comment. Road Code 2000, you do not enter an intersection unless it's clear. So every driver has an obligation to not enter an intersection unless the route is clear. I want to get that across, because you cannot follow another vehicle and legally say I've done the right thing to turn left if the road is not clear. So that's the first thing. Second thing is there is no evidence of crashes in this area that have indicated that crossovers impact on the crash history that we have. We have to look back to look forward, and it's a known method of crash investigation. You have to look historically to look to the future of the types of crashes that occur. We expect those rear-ender type crashes at signals, mainly because as the lights change, you have the amber gamblers and you have the people who go, no, I'm going to stop. And the ones behind them have seen the amber and they're hesitant or rushing to get through. That's the type of rear-ender we're seeing at this type of intersection, and typical of all signalised intersections. It's not through the turns that we have those type of crashes. It's always on the approaches. So I wanted to be transparent and give you as much information as I can about my experience and my expertise in crash analysis. I've been doing it for 30 years. It is a science. We don't just make it up. And effectively, risk, as I said, I have to normalise it in a way to understand if there is a real risk here or not. I do not see this risk based on the crash history. I do not see a risk based on the crossovers. And I do not see an increased risk to pedestrians or vehicle movements or buses. It's in a city area, you expect congestion, you expect slow movement, you expect buses, you expect pedestrians, and you expect to have slow travelling traffic. It's already got speed humps everywhere on South Terrace everywhere, so people are backing up to all of those as well. It's very well managed in that area and very constrained. So all the movements are slow and orchestrated, which is why the crash.
Address Mr. Sullivan's comment directly. The frontage of the development site to South Street is about 40 metres. So I think a bus turning left onto South Street from South Terrace, the bus length is about 10 metres, correct? The inward crossover to the site is at the eastern end, so it's about 39 to 40 metres east of the intersection. So a bus turning left onto South Street, being 10 metres long, is very unlikely to create congestion for other vehicles turning left onto South Street as well, because by the time the bus enters onto South Street, it's going to be well clear of the lights. Is that a fair assumption, Adam and Richard?
Yeah, that was the point I was making, that there is enough distance for that bus to make that long sweep and come in. And once the bus is straight, there is another 2-3 vehicle lengths behind it. Stacking space will be available back to the intersection.
But that proposal that I tendered is genuine.
Yep, no, that's good, thank you. I don't want to drift into another round of presentations. We've answered the question, we can move on. Any other questions?
Yes, the submissions that were made as part of the deputation forms talked about a couple of things. Firstly, it was argued that the business would be unworkable if it was left in, left out. Can you, you're now saying that you could accept that. So what is it? Is it unworkable or is it workable? The second thing is that you were basically saying the City of Fremantle assessment, they have no expertise in that area. Can you speak to that?
Sorry, can I don't think anyone said that. I think they're just challenging it. So that's a little bit different. So I don't want to...
Okay, so I apologise for those words, but the word expertise was certainly used and it was challenging that. You can speak to it and you can clarify that, that's fine. On page...
oh, sorry, Mr. Sullivan, you're asking a lot of questions in sequence.
Okay, you can answer them. I'll come back to the next one.
Yeah, just so we don't miss anything, that's all.
Yeah,
so the first question, I'll let Brian deal with that, but the important distinction here is that a left-in only movement from South Street and a left-out only movement from South Terrace is what the problem is. So if there was left-in, left-out to both crossovers, that would be a different situation. Is that correct, Brian?
Correct. So we're not proposing left-in and left-out. The report from the officers talked about full-turn movement not acceptable, although the traffic engineers had said it was workable. Then it went to left in, left out, subject to negotiation. Then it came down at the final recommendation to left in only on South Street, left out on South Terrace. From our experience, that will not work, and it also leads to the danger from an operational point of view that vehicles travelling east on South Street would then try and do a U-turn to go back into it anyway. If you've got left in, left out on both, it removes the right turn concern, but it means vehicles can go at the lights down South Terrace, left in, go out the other way. So they've still got the right to do the movement, but not full turn.
Before we move off that, do you have a question on that?
I have a question. It might not be yourself, Brian. It might be somebody else in the team specifically about the movement. And my question is the movement on the site currently. Can you speak to the movement on the site? Now, I know your crossover location is slightly different.
Slightly.
And you can speak to that as well. But what I'm trying to clarify, as I understand, is the current site does not provide, and I'll have the same question to the officers, by the way, the current site's movement out of crossover. Can you clarify that for me, please? And I don't mind who in the team speaks to it.
Okay. So is the question what traffic movement in and out does the site currently have?
We're currently speaking about a left in, left out, which is what Brian was referring to.
At the moment, it has full turn movement both ways.
That's what I'm getting to.
Yeah. There's no physical restriction to turning movement on either frontage road, so vehicles can make a right turn at the moment at both crossovers.
And when it was a boatyard until about 9 months ago, it had vehicles, usually four-wheel drives, because they need to be strong enough to tow the boat, and they would bring boats in and out of the yard connected to the four-wheel drive.
Thank you. So I have a follow-on question. It's now a traffic question. I've got the confirmation and clarity that I'm pretty sure it's going to be given. My question now relates to existing crossover, proposed crossover. We're talking about impact of development as it relates to this proposal, and I'm trying to get an understanding of impact of development given the site has got an existing movement associated with it and crossovers. Can you speak to what we're talking about or what you say is the change from the traffic movement and impact in terms of safety from the proposed? And you can speak however you wish, and I've got exactly the same question to the officers.
Sure, thank you. We have not done a survey to establish what the exact number of movements are or where at the crossovers, but there are a number of important points to note. Point one, as Brian alluded to, that both of those crossover for years has been operating as a full movement crossover, allowing right turn ins, allowing right turn outs, and at least for the last 5 years of crash records that we have access to, there has not been any crashes associated with movements in and out of the crossovers or associated with the right turn movements at the crossover. The second,
Before you go on to you, and your second, because the crash history refers to the intersection.
No, it picks up when you do a study of an intersection, it looks at about 100 meters approaches around the intersection. So effectively you're analysing that crash data, acknowledging that there's always queuing and there's always potential driveways and there's always potential impacts on that intersection. So the data.
So you're getting to my question, which is the distinction between you've said today, and the material we've got, you've talked about the crash history not associated with the movement of the site,
not
which
the
is
new movement, exactly what was already there. It's like the crashes
yes.
which have occurred
Yes.
are relating to the boat.
And I'm trying to tease that out in more plain language about the from the technical to a more plain English sort of speak in relation to your analysis of that.
But what was interesting for me was I didn't realise it was boats and four-wheel drives. My experience of boats and four-wheel drives is there's a lot of manoeuvring going on and they're going backwards and forwards and they could reverse in, drive out, but it's longer vehicles up to 8 meters or so, and they're getting in and out of there and manoeuvring in this site over a number of years, and we saw nothing in the crash stats. Now, I wasn't aware of that. I purely looked at the crash stats. So when I link the two together, I go, well, that was more hazardous movements of vehicles and trailers coming in and out of a site than a single vehicle at a time. And yet there is no crash statistics showing up in that area relating to those crossovers. So that was something that I identified from the observation. I don't know the history of the property. I purely look at the statistics, but there is no history of crashes in any previous use in the 5 years.
I think it's important to point that the crash data, for every crash, there is an approximate know exactly what location on the approach to the intersection, departure from the intersection, middle of the intersection. Normally, as Richard mentioned, when you look at this thing, you look at 100 meters on the approach and departure of the intersection. And then there is a description attached to each crash that a vehicle was turning right from south to east and vehicle traveling south hit that car, or a vehicle was moving into a crossover, there was a side swap, so there are descriptions. So you can sort of drill down into that data and then translate it to risk and what actually happened, and was it associated with the crossover, was it associated with the intersection itself. And as Richard mentioned, his assessment has shown that all those crashes which has happened there were actually related to the signalized intersection itself, related to move on the approach to the signalized intersection, not the departure. And both of our crossovers are located on the departure section of the intersection in terms of the right turn movement. But a lot of, I suppose, the debates and discussion associated with the right turn movement are kind of irrelevant now, because our client has accepted.
So that's what I want to drill down now. Let's
Correct.
park the right-hand movement and that
Correct.
just for a second, because I think what I heard earlier, the current conditions 10 talks about left in only via South Street, left out only via South Terrace. In your formal request, you've asked left turn, right turn in via South Street and left turn and right turn out via South Terrace. But now I'm hearing left in, left out, left in, left out. What are we actually asking for here?
Left in, left out.
You're asking for
each
left in,
crossover, each
left
crossover.
out on both
Crossovers.
crossovers?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So sorry, but that's condition 10 anyway, is that right?
No.
That's, no, condition 10 is requesting left in and left out, but not left in, left
so
out, left
It's
in.
left in only from South Street, no other movements, and left out only onto South Terrace, no other movements.
Yeah. Okay, let's bring this back. Councillor Sullivan, any further questions of the applicant?
Yes, so just in terms of what you've just said, do you have any evidence, statistics, assessment of the level of movements, the volume of movements that existed in and out of the boatyard that have been there for a very long time? So you've spoken to looking at the crash data and didn't see any evidence that it was being caused by the crossovers that were there, but have you got any awareness of the volumes of traffic that went through those crossovers?
That's a hard one. I might have a go at that one. The way we look at volume data is through traffic counts, and the traffic counts are not taken for driveway crossovers, they're taken for the roads. So effectively, you can also look at the intersection itself, and there's a program called SCATS, which identifies each lane and each volume by lane. So it's a very simple method of calculating how many vehicles in each lane. Unfortunately, we don't have that for driveways. So we cannot say how many vehicles are coming out of the driveways. But what I can say is clearly a boat and a trailer, to me, seems far more hazardous than a single vehicle entering at the time. That's something I can clearly say.
I don't dispute that, but I was talking about volumes and
volumes is hard.
Volumes is important.
But I can probably answer that question. The volumes of a boat sales yard is we are talking about during the peak hours. So you got customers coming in, customers going out, staff coming in, staff going out. My educated guess is that it probably would have been quite similar to the numbers that we are talking about for the car wash. It may have been few cars less, it might have been few cars more. Something like that is different day to day. But my educated guess that it probably would have been similar to
in peak hour.
In peak hour.
Yeah, daily might be different, but peak hour might be the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. There's a further question, and I won't debate the probability of that until we get into committee. The familiarity of drivers with the movements that they're doing. A boatyard, virtually all of the movements in and out of the boatyard were by the owner, bringing boats in and taking boats out. The familiarity of someone at a car wash is completely different. So the familiarity of what they're having to deal with getting in and out of those crossovers. So is that a consideration also of people inexperienced in that particular environment, dealing with the complex movements of one of the persons talked about the number of pedestrians, cyclists and the like.
Before you respond to that question, because I think we keep sort of looping on this one issue, before you respond to that question, and it's a good question, but I'd like you to also respond to anything else that might be contemplated for this site under the mixed use zoning, because we're sort of talking about the boatyard a lot, but we're just done, right? So just because something worked doesn't mean that this one needs to be the same. So now I'm actually asking if you can answer Councillor Sullivan's question, but also answer, what if it was developed with something else on this site? 3 stories, mixed use development, what would what would that risk be in terms of the other?
Perhaps, presiding member, that's why I was asking the familiarity question as well, because obviously someone living there is familiar, whereas someone who only visits the site occasionally or once is not familiar.
I'll answer first from an operational point of view, because we've got 5 others to do, and that Mount Pleasant area is not dissimilar in density. We find from our patronage statistics that we keep, we know that most of them are within 1.5 to 2.5 kilometres of the site, and they form habits. So in terms of if they're within 1.5 to 2 kilometres, most people by definition would therefore be familiar with the locality, and that site's been there for a long time with 2 crossovers. So I think if that answers that aspect, I'm also, apart from having car washes, I am a retail and commercial property developer. I can tell you that apartments on the site clearly don't work at the moment. What may work, or an alternative, would be something like there's enough coffee shops, enough
I might
restaurants.
just pause you there, sorry, Mr. McCubbing. I'm not seeking to explore what might work. I'm seeking to explore from a traffic perspective. Anything else that might.
Well, the other alternatives would be fast food restaurants and other uses like that, which will generate a great deal more traffic than what the car wash will.
And I would say that even a mixed use, some sort of retail, commercial at ground level and residential above would have generated more traffic than what is proposed. The proposal is a relatively low generator of traffic, and the familiarity issue is actually the opposite way of what you are contemplating, that a boatyard, you travel long distances to buy boats and deposit your boats for sale. It's not that immediate area. So the people who would have come to the boatyard, as was mentioned, on a big trailer, 4-wheel drive, a big car coming in and out of that place, would have had less familiarity of the locality than patrons of the car wash.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan, further questions?
I will have some of the acoustic consultant, but maybe we finish the traffic ones first.
No, that's fine. I'm going to deal with all your questions first.
Yeah. I just, in fact, I won't ask this one. It's actually more of a debate one. So the acoustic ones that I have relate not so much to what happens inside the shed, but the vacuum zone. So the first question is, it does seem to be based on the people who live to the west, in other words, on the other side of South Street, and utilises the notion of the sound wall that's 1.8 metres high right next to the vacuum areas. But I'm just wondering, the people who live immediately to the south in the apartments which are up high, and there is a gap between the eastern apartments and the western apartments. So there are 2 lots of apartments, and there is a gap between those, and those apartments have windows that would presumably be virtually line of sight to the vacuum area with no acoustic barrier between them. I'm just curious as to why they aren't the main point of assessment, rather than the properties over on the west, which have a sound barrier wall of 1.8 metres screening, in theory, screening them from that noise.
Yeah.
So
I can start with that.
And,
and then I'll invite George to add some technical rigour to the response. But I guess a close look at the acoustic assessment shows that they considered noise received by properties to the north, east, south and west, so it wasn't only localised to a particular receiver. The noise levels to the south, first of all, with that gap that you're talking about in between the 2 upper level buildings, that's actually completely covered by the car wash structure itself. So there's a very high kind of boundary wall. There's a sectional drawing that's included in the DA drawings. That's not open to the car wash whatsoever. So there's a significant amount of attenuation that occurs just by the virtue of the design of the car wash. When you look at the noise levels that are actually received at those apartments in the nighttime period, they're 38 and 39 decibels, which is actually nearly 10 decibels less than the assigned level maximum. So if I was living in those apartments, I'd actually be very, very happy with those assigned noise levels. To give you an idea, 35 decibels in real world terms is the same as being in a library. George, did you have anything to add to that?
It was a fair question, and you basically did me out of a job there. It's the reason for the lower than what would be expected by the layman at those windows from the vacuum units is exactly that, the barrier effect of the structure that's proposed.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan?
If I could, maybe have a break and I'll come back. So,
all right.
if that's all right.
Councillor Van Dawson, questions from you. Don't go away, George. I think there's more coming your way.
I will have a couple for acoustic. Thank you everyone for your presentations and addressing many of my questions. I've ticked off because they've all been addressed. So thank you for your presentations and the questions from Andrew Sullivan. I would just like to clarify some of the acoustic points. One of them was the boundary walls. To the east recommends 2.1 metres and 1.8 to the west, and it says solid walls. I just wanted to ask about the materials of those walls and what would be the optimal, or what's the highest performing acoustic material that would help mitigate noise for particularly the property to the east.
George, just before you get onto that, I'll just clarify, I included this in my presentation submission, but that property owner to the east actually supported the proposal. They put in a submission of support. Yeah, we engaged with them before we launched the application. So, George, did you want to respond to that question?
Yep, not a problem. So, I suppose to paraphrase the question, it was how dense that wall needs to be. So what we're asking of the walls in these instances is a barrier effect. Now, basically, as long as noise through the barrier doesn't contribute more than noise over, or the amount of noise that the barrier is providing, it's acting as a barrier. So in this instance, with the noise sources in the area, it would be in the order of a colour-bond fence would be sufficient to act as a barrier. So anything above and beyond that would be in excess of noise through, contributing more than noise over.
Sorry, George, it's Alessandro. I just want to clarify something. What's the minimum surface mass required?
It'd be like 14 kgs per square metre. So pretty much bang on oh, sorry, that's for the main roads. It's probably a little bit lower than this due to the high frequency content. Right. So 14 kg per square metre. Yep, sorry, that rolled off straight off the tongue because that's from the main road specs. It'll be a little bit lower than that. So a colour-bond fence would be sufficient, which I think comes in at around 11.
Thank you, George. Councillor Van Dawson.
Thank you. And I just wanted to ask just a clarifying question on the hours of operation, which we've got 6:30 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. and appreciate you did originally ask for 24-hour operations. It was also mentioned potentially 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. was acceptable.
Yes.
And just wondered where that came from. I'm sort of just with my background with impacts of sort of noise generating commercial uses adjoining residential, I sort of would lean towards the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. just to protect residential amenity. But I do appreciate the acoustic report has addressed compliance, and you can have longer hours, you comply with that later hour threshold, but I'm just sort of a little bit uncomfortable. I use those car washes, so I know the noise that they generate, and if I live next door, and I appreciate the adjoining neighbour does support it, but I still, protecting the residential amenity of the area, I would prefer to see reduced hours of operation personally. I just wondered how that would affect your business.
The 7 to 10 came about as a consequence of ongoing consultation with the city's officers, which has been quite proactive over a number of months. As far as the operational hours are concerned, all our other washers are 24/7. And from a viability point of view, a lot of people don't work any longer 9 to 5. They'll work some of them start late morning, finish, and if you look at the alfresco dining, a short distance to the south, most of that finishes around about 9 or 10. So and it may surprise you, but the evolution in technology has staggered us. And even in the last 18 months, we've got vacuums that are generating half the noise they were 18 months ago. So we will not be putting noisy machines, and if they get too noisy, we'll pull them out. We've done that elsewhere.
Yeah, so can I just add to that as well, just to say, again, always going back to the assessment, because that's what we have to work with in terms of the noise generated. It differentiates between the day period, the evening period, and the night period. Obviously, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. is classified as the daytime period under the regs, and 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. is classified as the evening period. So reducing the hours down to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. would, exclude that nighttime period, which has the more stringent noise levels. But the noise generated during the daytime and the evening period, it still falls within those 30s to 40s of decibels, which, as I mentioned before, they're very much in the quiet threshold of noise based on what the Commission, tells us in their guidelines. So, if the nature of the noise that was generated was in the higher range based on the thresholds, then maybe a reduction in operating hours would be appropriate. But given that there is an existing evening to nighttime amenity along South Terrace as it is, with all the various land uses that already exist, and the fact that the acoustic assessment does show noise levels that are generally in the lower threshold, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. would seem like a more appropriate.
Can I just, before we move off that, one of the earlier presenters, I think it was Adam Flynn, made the comment that noise at night drops off a lot. And if that's the case, and given the surrounding noise drop, what impact does that have on the noise levels received at nearby properties?
Thank you for that question. I think that's a very technical question, so I'll probably ask George to deal with it.
George, are you able to answer that for us?
Yep, sure can. So, okay, so the tail end of the question is the actual drop in other noise doesn't actually change the noise levels of the car wash, which makes sense. Now, our regulations and our assigned noise levels from them have as it's just been pointed out, has a day, evening, night noise level, and that assigned noise level is calculated by is undertaken by calculation and determining an influencing factor. So the land use in the area, how much traffic's in the area, all goes into what would be a reasonable expectation of amenity in the area for noise from one premise to another. So to put that into context, over East, they'll work at, they'll actually measure what background noise level is, and then your assigned noise level would be background +5 for these various time periods. But we actually do a calc instead, which in some instances makes things easier and others makes things a bit more difficult. So as far as noise drop off, that's the way, other noise drop-offs, that's the way the regs work, in that, well, at night there'd be an expectation of a lower level because other noise sources go down. Now, it kind of enters another element of outside of a technical assessment, which I call a technical assessment, and more into a planning sense of, well, how does this relate to the ambient noise environment? As in how much impact upon amenity are we having, in sort of I call it an airy-fairy sort of sense of a feeling. So in this instance, we've got a location where we've got a set of assigned noise levels that we have to comply with, because that's our set of laws. But we have a location where the actual background noise levels are in excess, well, highly likely to be in excess of those allowable noise levels. So we have both South Street and South Terrace with main roads figures is about 10,000 for each street that have that amount of traffic for those times would be produced in the order of around high 50s at the neighbouring houses of this intersection. Now that's maximum traffic, but then we also tracking the traffic for the drop-off periods of like the evening and night. We're getting to about half traffic flows in up to and beyond 10 p.m. So that means it's only dropping down to around about the order of 55. So still 10 dB higher than the assigned noise levels that we're aiming for. So typically in Western Australia, the way our assigned noise levels works, we're designing to background, but in this instance, it's highly likely that we're actually designing to a level that's 10 dB below background noise levels. Now, the other interesting part about this site, probably not interesting from a noise perspective, it is traffic flows at this location actually increases on a weekend. So it's actually noisier on the weekend. So a lot of the times it drops right off. But in this area, we've got more traffic over that weekend period where probably, I don't know, we have people's habits, the car wash should be used more again as well. And again, a similar day, evening, night sort of pattern where we don't actually get the drop off that you'd expect. So in the time periods that's proposed to operate here, we're looking at design levels 10 dB below. Also bearing in mind that we're including a tonal component on our calculated levels. Now, that in itself is quite conservative because if you've got a noise level that's 10 dB below ambient noise levels, you're not actually affecting the overall noise. So we're adding this 5 dB adjustment to it that's dictated by the regulations to a noise level that may be unlikely to be even audible because it's actually not affecting the ambient noise level in the area. So I might have gone off target there a bit, but I hope that answers it.
That's exactly what I wanted to know. So thank you for that. Councillor Van Dawson, back to you.
No more questions.
Thank you. Other panel members?
Just a quick one. I think in one of the presentations, the issue of vibration was mentioned. Can you address whether you've assessed that, or B, whether it's an issue?
I can say off the bat that it's not an issue. We've never had to assess that for any of the car wash or service station or other commercial development applications we've ever done. But I can probably also defer to Brian, who operates 5 of these already, about whether vibrations have ever been a concern or a complaint.
We haven't had one of those across all of our sites over 15 years.
Yeah, I can also probably say as a layman, I use an automatic car wash once a week. I don't feel vibration through my wheels into my steering wheel when I'm sitting in the car during a wash cycle.
Okay. Once a week, you're making me feel very bad now. I do. Other questions, John?
No, everything else has been addressed. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Couple of questions, planning questions. My question is around land use. There's been a number of comments provided in the RA and submissions today, as well as in the discussion in terms of all the submissions talking about it. Can you speak to the issue of land use in relation to the appropriateness for this site in the context of those comments, where they've talked about it being inconsistent with the surrounding type of uses, both along the street as well as the residential? Can you speak or make any comments on that?
Sure, thank you for that question. So I guess first and foremost, we look at whether the use is contemplated or capable of approval within the zone that it's proposed. In the mixed use zone, motor vehicle wash as a use is an A use, which means it's discretionary, capable of approval subject to discretion, but also subject to mandatory consultation. That period of consultation has been undertaken. Now, in terms of the discretionary items associated with this, as I mentioned earlier, the attraction to this particular site is its frontage to 2 key roads in the locality. South Terrace carries about 8,900 vehicles per day, and that obviously creates a significant amount of vehicular patronage that supports the notion of the use being on the site. The site also has a historical element to it about having commercial uses that have been very much car-based and still remains the case today. My examination of the mixed use zone in the city is that clearly it's intended to be a flexible type of zone. If it wasn't meant to be a flexible type of zone, then all those vehicle-based uses like car wash, service station, light industry, warehouse storage, they'd be X uses rather than discretionary uses, although I do note that warehouse storage is actually permitted use. So Brian could lodge a DA tomorrow for an external hard stand for storage and it would be permitted because that's what the warehouse storage land use caters for. It's an interesting point about the mixed use zone. But looking at how this use can be compatible within its context, the site's within the South Fremantle heritage area. We did a lot of work with the city and their heritage team to improve the design of the facility and its interface with the local area. And we got to a point where the city's heritage officers were able to determine that the design of the facility is appropriate in the context of the South Fremantle heritage area. There's a very comprehensive heritage assessment that's an attachment to the RAR that I think provides a really good factual examination of the characteristics of the local area and also the design features that have been incorporated into this proposal to demonstrate why it's compatible within its context. So I think that clears the design component away from it. The traffic assessments have been completed and they demonstrate that it's a relatively low traffic generating use. Obviously, I don't want to get back into the traffic discussion. It's been discussed ad nauseum. But originally, full movements were proposed. I think we're in a situation now where the proponents can accept left in, left out movements to both crossovers, which we hope alleviates any concerns given that the right turn movements are extracted away from the proposal. Then the other key issue is noise. And we have an acoustic assessment that originally was prepared on the basis of 24-hour operation. We've now reduced operating hours and Brian's conceded further to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. The assessment demonstrates, categorically that there's compliance through all of those periods. And, I hate to be repeating myself, but we're talking about noise levels in the 30s and 40s of decibels, which is below the ambient noise levels in the area and generally considered to be in the quiet range under the WPC noise guidelines. So from my point of view as a planner, those would be all the relevant discretionary elements that would have to be addressed as part of an application. And in my opinion, why this land use and this development is appropriate for this site in this context.
My next question is to do with the street interface and pedestrian movement. There's been comments and you've heard these today. Do you have any comments you wish to make in relation to the concerns raised regarding impact of this development on the street pedestrian movement on the street?
Yes, thank you for that opportunity. Probably more so just a point of clarification, because I believe one of the submitters was trying to say that the exit movement out of the car wash would have poor sight lines and wouldn't be able to see pedestrians. That's actually not the case. The sight lines along South Terrace on the southern side are compliant because of the way that the building was designed, which was recently constructed, I think in the last 6 or 7 years, had to comply with the current standards for sightlines. The noise wall that faces South Terrace is offset by 1 metre. And the reason we did that was to enable a 1 metre wide landscaping strip facing the street, but also to ensure that sightlines would be adequate as vehicles come out of the facility. It's also noted that there are existing crossovers that have serviced this site and still do service this site. So any impact to pedestrian amenity, in my opinion, would be very, very low, if not non-existent, given that this is also a low traffic generating land use during the peak periods.
I think if I may put that last point in context, I have to refer to traffic numbers. I'm sorry, but the 7 vehicles per peak hour, as I did mention, is equivalent to about 8-9 minutes per vehicle. So that will not have hardly any impact on the pedestrians on the footpaths crossing the crossovers.
My final question is to do with the left in, left out movement that you've referred to. It's probably to Brian, but also to the rest of the team. What do you understand any associated road obligations to restrict movement in the form that you've talked about to left in, left out? And I am talking about road pavement works that would not just signage, but physically prevent someone doing a right turn. What's your understanding of your obligation, or that would relate to that?
Brian, let me just go on that for you. The specifications, I think, would need to come from the city's technical services team in terms of how that would be restricted, but definitely because those restrictions are coming about as a result of the development, they'd be funded by the proponent, not by the city.
So that's your understanding.
Reference was made to that in the office report. There's a clause on left in, left out movements, and it refers to median splitter, a mix of median splitters, signage and line marking, and the design of the crossovers. And we're quite happy with that, providing, of course, any requirement is reasonable.
Can I just follow up on a precise point? Because we're talking about now, am I right in saying that your change, your suggestion for condition 10 would then now read left turn in and left turn out via the South Street crossover, and left turn in and left turn out via the South Terrace crossover? Yes?
Yes.
So that would mean that you would have, if you're coming in from South Terrace, turning and I'm just getting confused. If you're coming in from South Terrace and you're turning in left, you've come in through the intersection and you're making a sharp turn left and you're coming into where the cars are coming out of the.
Correct.
So we're forcing an internal traffic movement within the site.
The average car wash turnover time is around about 8 to 9 minutes.
Yeah.
And from our trading experience, we've got a single crossover on Canning Highway in Mount Pleasant. And that's a looped movement. With this, we believe that most over 85–90% of the movements will be left in.
I'm sure that can be done on the site. If you look at a survey on a busy day, then worse things happen. But just to get it clear, so what we are allowing then is that movement into the site of South Terrace,
yes,
into what is currently the exit, and similarly, what is currently the entrance, we are allowing an exit from there, which means if you're coming out and you want to go into South Street, you can come out, turn right, and then exit South Street. Is that what we're proposing?
Yes, the internal driveways.
Yeah.
Are wide enough, obviously, to accommodate the two-way movement. Yeah.
Okay. And you're happy with that? Ben, would that be a satisfactory? I mean, the danger I see here with any of this mucking around with it, if you don't have those right turns in, you've got rat running or U-turns or whatever. Are we happy that is
from my point of view, I always believe that restriction of traffic is not a good idea because that doesn't make that traffic to go away. The traffic will find another way to get into the site. Traffic is like water. But I think our client has decided that respect to the officer's concerns to make that compromise. My view is that you will allow all movements because it stops some potential undesirable movements. It stops vehicles going around the block and trying to access the business, or when they are coming out, they have to go around the block to get into the direction that they want to go. All those movements are unnecessary. So whenever you look at this restriction, you have to consider all of that. That's why, from my point of view, restriction in this instance is not the optimum solution. And we have actually said that the left in, left out is a compromise solution in order to address officers' concern and community interest.
Yeah, but even in your current proposal, all of the exits go out to South Terrace, don't they? None of them go to South Street.
Correct.
True.
Correct.
Yeah. I'll probably just add, sorry, that with the left in, left out arrangement at both crossovers, it alleviates that issue to an extent, though, because at least traffic can still enter the site from more directions, as opposed to the left in only.
In a sense, it's more free in a sense because you've got entrance and exits off both intersections, of both the crossovers.
Correct. Correct.
Thank you.
Further questions? No? All right. My questions have also been asked as follow-up. So I think we have spent enough time with the applicant team. Thank you for your time. We're now going to move to invite questions of the local government.
Actually, can you tell me having a break?
What I might do, we've been going at this for a little while. I've had a request, and so I'm going to move a procedural motion to take a 2-minute comfort break. Seconded, Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. All those in favour? Carried. We'll take a 2-minute break. We'll be back in a bit while we get comfortable. Right, we are back and moving to the section where we invite questions of the local government officers. We have Chloe Johnston with us today from the City of Fremantle. Councillor Van Dawson, I'm going to start with you this time. Do you have questions of the city officers?
I do, thank you. Hi Chloe, thanks for coming today. I just had some questions on the land use. Just looking at the objectives of the zone, looking to sort of clarify those, as well as one of the items in the clause 67 of the regs. Can you tell me, I didn't see it in the officers reporting, where is the desired future character of each area? Where, or is it defined in Fremantle's or the planning framework for Fremantle? Where would I look to take a view on what that might be for that site or that area?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Van Dawson. Typically, you would look to things like the local planning strategy, which at the moment is in draft form, or there is quite an old version of that. Another element that is of particular importance in this area is probably the heritage policies for the area. So the South Fremantle heritage area objectives and statement of significance.
Okay. Thank you. Actually, no, I'll leave it at that. That's the only question I had, just to clarify.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan, questions?
Yes, thank you, presiding member. Just in terms of your R13 response about the responsibility for works regarding whether or not a median strip goes in, I guess the question was in part trying to ask two elements. I mean, obviously it would go in if it was a requirement of the planning approval. So if there was a condition that required that, the city would ask for that and it would go in. I guess the question was more, if it wasn't a requirement of the condition of a planning approval, would it be the city's intent to put that in anyway?
That's an interesting question, Councillor Sullivan. I will point out we do have the city's senior traffic and design engineer online as well, if there are any particular traffic questions. I'd imagine that any works to the road would be part of that standard process of upgrading and reviewing road networks. So if there was a need, if the development occurred and other developments contributed to an issue in that area, if there was a safety issue, then council may well decide to install a median. But I don't believe that there is an existing plan to install that median.
Okay. I won't pursue that question any further because it kind of like relates to if it is the movement that is now being suggested to be acceptable. It would make sense that it would be a condition anyway. So, yeah.
Any other questions, Chloe?
I guess the question I would have is regarding the mixed use, and it kind of follows on from Councillor Van Dawson's question, is that the mixed use areas in the scheme are quite different in their characteristics from areas which might be considered highway commercial almost, you know, on main roads where the suggestion is to try and get mixed use, trying to get residential into what used to just be highway commercial zones. And there are mixed use zones in areas like this, which are sort of traditional, kind of like strip, old fashioned town centre-y kind of suburban environments where I guess the intent was to try and get more commercial into what was a residential zone. So the question kind of goes to how do we, as a decision-making authority, distinguish between the different mixed-use zones, noting that it's a requirement to essentially do so under part 3 of the definition of the mixed-use zone, that the mixed-use zone is sympathetic with the desired future character of each area. So can you talk to that as to how the planners would deal with each individual characteristic of each individual mixed-use zone? Because they're obviously quite different.
Look, absolutely. With every land use assessment, you're looking at the objectives of the zone, but you're also looking at the existing area and those other contributing factors. So the other land uses, the heritage nature of the area, and looking at the locality. Like you say, we've got a lot of mixed use zones in a lot of areas, and the objectives are broad. So what we need to have a look at is the existing land uses and the impact of this on the amenity of those, as well as whether this actual use completely conflicts with any of those.
So if I could maybe sort of sharpen that question as well, would it be the case that a land use that's permissible, not necessarily as of right, but in terms of this one, could be permissible, meaning it might be okay in one mixed use precinct, but might not be okay in another mixed use precinct? Or is it the fact that the land use should be considered to be okay in all of them, irrespective of which precinct it is?
Absolutely. Can I just add some sharpening to the sharpened question? And that's a good question, councillor. Does the city ever use a mechanism of restricted uses in your scheme to do exactly what councillor Sullivan's asking? So there is an ability under certain schemes to apply restricted uses where to a specific site that says, well, on other mixed use sites, you can do all of that. This one, we only do a few. Do you have that mechanism?
Pretty old
scheme. We don't have that mechanism, but I will point out that this land use is an A use, which means it is not permitted unless it meets all those tests, which means you need to look at the existing locality, elements like the traffic, elements like the amenity, heritage, all those factors. So being an A use, it needs a reasonable level of scrutiny before it can pass that test. So it might be in this location it's acceptable, it might be further down South Terrace it isn't. So the mixed use zone doesn't necessarily mean, unless it is a P use and therefore effectively guaranteed, it does require assessment of the immediate context.
Can I ask a question on that specific issue?
Yep. So can I just check, are you done with your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. You can ask us any questions if you like.
On that specific issue of land use and context, your report says it's acceptable, that you've done the analysis. You talked about the zone. You've talked about surrounding form type of development. You have a heritage consideration, and you said it meets those, a planning assessment meets those. We have heard from many people today, as well as we have submissions related to these matters. Do you have any other comments to make in relation to those concerns that have been raised, particularly in the context of locational appropriateness of a development of this land use, given that it's a discretionary use?
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Member. It's certainly an application that is on balance for us. When the application came in, it was proposed to be 24 hours and the design and the character of the development looked quite different. So once we'd had those submissions from the public, and I think there was about 80 of them, and they raised valid concerns, and we shared some of those concerns about the intensity and the appearance of this development. So we put those concerns to the applicant, and they did go away and reduce the scale of the development in terms of the hours it's open. So it had consideration and gave some respite to surrounding residential areas, and they did a lot of work on the appearance of the development from a heritage perspective as well to make sure it was a lot more compatible with the land use. So in our view, they have looked at some of those submissions and some of those concerns, and they have made adjustments to the built form and the level of operations on site to reduce that impact. Elements like the condition about the left in and left out on the various streets as well, try to reduce the impact on pedestrian amenity, traffic safety as well. So we think there's enough measures in the recommendation and in the applicant's proposal that mean it is an acceptable use for this location.
I have another question. My question goes to mandatory provisions in the scheme. There's been also discussion in the material we have about underdevelopment of the site and an expectation, resident expectation of a residential component forming part of development on this site. does your scheme, your planning provisions, have mandatory provisions of land use or mix of land use on this site in this particular zone?
No, it does not. So the objectives of the zone talk about a mix of uses, and like Councillor Sullivan pointed out, that there is a reasonable amount of residential in the area, but being objectives, there is no mandatory requirement that each development on every site must have a component of residential.
And my final question, if I may, in relation to underdevelopment of site, and that was quite a concern, what does the scheme say? I couldn't find any specific provisions that required a more intensive form on the site. Can you clarify what the framework says in relation to that particular element?
There are no provisions about minimum density or height or build form in the scheme.
Okay, that's my question.
A couple of quick questions. Just a quick follow up on the desired future character of the area. I gather that generally the surrounding zoning is R30. Is that right?
Yes, the mixed use zone has a potential of up to R60 under certain conditions.
Okay, but generally we're within an R30 environment,
yep.
So pretty low density anyway.
Yes.
Very low density. Yeah. Okay. The other question I have had to do with, if you then required some sort of works on medians in South Terrace and particularly in South Street, would that have regard to the people across the road? And I'm particularly looking at South Street, where there's a very wide crossover of about 5 car widths directly across the road from this crossover. So any work that there was on this site restricting movement from this site would equally restrict movement across the road. Is that correct? And would that be an intended or an unintended consequence?
It would probably depend on how far that median went, but it's reducing the risk overall. Right turn movements out of that site are probably less frequent. I think there's a yoga studio there, and there's limited car parking.
10 car bays. It's all double stacked by the look of it. So
yeah, it may well be, but in our view, it's probably an acceptable consequence. This intersection is a busy one, particularly over the weekend, when a lot of these uses are a lot more active.
Further questions? Oh, sorry, okay. With regard to the street interface and pedestrian movement, does the city currently have any current planning provisions or draft planning provisions that talk about the expected future for the street itself? And I'm talking about streetscape plan or road combination road streetscape plan, which some organisations do. Do you have one at present, and do you have any in train at the moment that speaks to what is the desired street in pedestrian environment along in that area?
I don't believe there's anything specific for this particular area. There's a general principle of improving canopy cover and footpath condition, but I don't believe that there is an active project or strategy for this particular intersection.
I have one final question. Sorry, I keep jumping in. Do you have, or anybody else online, have a comment to the commentary we've heard today about the left in, left out movements? We've got information in the RAR, we've got information in the applicant's submission, we have an R13, and then we've had conversation today, which was at a point of applicant indicating what they are requesting for consideration as part of this proposal is a left in, left out on both streets. Do you, or anybody of the team, the technical team, can they speak to that, given we have lots of material in iterations of?
Sure. The left in, left out of both crossovers is obviously a new request as of the meeting today. So we haven't had the opportunity to do a detailed assessment of how that might look for the on-site development. Officer's recommendation is about left in of South Street and left out of South Terrace. So there's a clear flow of movement through the site. And as the applicant mentioned today in the long traffic discussion, the level of risk is acceptable for them. We disagree with that level of risk in terms of traffic movement across the streets. It seems that the applicant has accepted that, which is great. Left in off South Street may be a little bit easier to cater for on site because there's a bit more room for movement. The issue with left in off South Terrace, just having a look at the plan, it's a lot more constrained, and that's where you've got people exiting the car wash bays. So it's a little difficult to give a clear position on whether that would work. It is obviously a lot better than any right turns out or into the site. Though, Simon, I'm not sure if you are still online and had any comment on how you think the left in and left out of both crossovers may or may not work.
I pretty much agree with what you just said. However, we are obviously just trying to minimise potential conflicts. That's the intention here.
Can I follow up on this point? What about the issue which has been brought up, which if we go with your suggestion, which is left in one way and left out on the other crossover, that there is a potential for U-turns, rat runs and so on. There's some offside consequences of all of
that. Simon, I'm not sure if you had any comment from a traffic perspective.
It does potentially increase U-turns. That's probably correct.
With that, I mean, we're balancing different levels of risk and different scenarios here. It seems to me that a U-turn seems to me an illegal U-turn and increasing the risk of that is a pretty serious matter.
It is a sufficient. Well, it is a risk. Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Okay, I have a few, if you'll indulge me a little bit. So there's a comment on page 4 of the RA that the impact of the proposed use on adjoining residential property should be assessed as if the use was being proposed in the residential zone that is not permitted. Is there a clause in your scheme or policy that underpins this comment?
I'll clarify that that is the council's position.
Yeah. I'm just checking whether there's a mechanism in your scheme that says a use on a site should be assessed as if it was in the adjoining zone.
No, there isn't. I think the way officers would look at it would be that in practical terms, the lot directly next door is in the residential zone. And so you'd look at the land uses that are on that zone and the interaction of the mixed use zone and probably what the intent of a single width lot all the way along South Terrace was possibly intending on doing to transition between a fairly intensive road and the lower density residential area.
Okay. Now, I know you've done the assessment against the 10 design principles of SPP7, and I'm not querying the outcomes of that assessment. It's a very sound assessment. I'm just curious why a proposal like this wouldn't have been referred to your design review panel, especially given its location in a heritage precinct.
So we do have in-house heritage architects, so they have reviewed the proposal. Our panel is set up more for larger developments, and when we've got in-house expertise, we're satisfied that we've got enough to review that.
Thank you. So given these heritage architects and their assessment of the proposal, so from a heritage perspective, is it only the increased building setbacks that contribute to the comments that the proposal isn't fully consistent with the provisions of LPP 3.6?
Yeah, that's the main, I guess, shortfall with this proposal. The initial design was a flat roof square. I think it was blue at one point. So the character and the design of the built form wasn't consistent. The the applicant's made some changes to reduce the impact and simplify the building form. So there's enough reflection and inspiration from the surrounding area so that it doesn't conflict with the residential properties. But ideally a commercial building like this would be closer to the street, but it doesn't cause so much of a conflict that it is to the detriment of the heritage area in their opinion.
Okay, so just on that, and then I just want to round out that comment. Those heritage architects or heritage experts that have reviewed this is now comfortable that the amended design is largely sympathetic with the general built form character of the heritage area.
Correct, yes.
Correct. Thank you. That is probably all I have. I think we have asked lots of questions, and I think maybe it's timely that we move to the report now.
Member, sorry, could I just have one final question on that exact matter?
Sure.
Will only be one.
Sure.
In the summary from the Heritage Officer's report, it basically says that the development will only have minor impact on the heritage value of the South Fremantle heritage area. It's not saying that it will have no impact. So is the requirement that it has no impact, or is the requirement that it is allowed to have some impact?
And there's have zero impact on the heritage area. It is a matter to be given due regard when assessing the context and the proposed built form. So there are many developments that may have some impact. It's quite unlike our demolition clause, which is very strict on those matters. It is more a broad assessment.
I have one final question from Member Lafanti, and then we're moving to the report.
It's really a little bit of follow-on question in relation to detrimental impact. Again, we've had presentations and this is discussed. The position that has been put forward was that no impact can occur, and that that's my takeaway of what I'm hearing and reading, no impact, any impact that's detrimental would result in the development not meeting the provisions of the scheme in that respect. Can you speak to the issue of detrimental impacts and how you consider that from the planning framework? Sorry, in this particular site.
Yeah, sure. So I guess the term detrimental impacts is many facets that we need to have a look at. Those matters to be considered in the regulations. We need to have due regard to those, due regard to the objectives of the zone, whether there's an impact on the amenity of adjoining residential properties and commercial uses. It's a pretty broad discussion and question, and a lot of the matters on this one are a fairly due regard, but it needs to get to the point where I guess the DAP is satisfied that the impact isn't so significant that it's in conflict with other uses and causing, I guess, an undue amenity impact on the surrounding uses. It is a discretionary land use, and it is a use that DAP needs to be satisfied that it is meeting the broad objectives of the scheme and the heritage provisions and general matters to be considered.
Thank you. I will now move to the report, and I'm going to seek a mover and seconder for the recommendation in the report, noting that recommendation is for refusal of the application. Do I have a mover for the refusal motion?
I'll move that.
Sullivan. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Dawson. Councillor Sullivan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Presiding Member. This is obviously a very difficult one, and some of the conversation that we've had today is probably not the actual conversation that we really need to have. I mean, and particularly with some of the changes. But I think the key issues here are actually going to be about the desired character of the South Fremantle South Terrace strip, and also the issue of just how many amenity impacts is too many. In other words, is this a case of it is detrimental by 1,000 cuts that when you look at each of those individual issues, it's, a little bit of impact, a little bit of impact, a little bit of impact. But how much is too much in a precinct like this? And they're the two major things that I think we should talk about. We have talked a lot about traffic movement, and I would concede that the notion of right turns was just an absolute red line for me, and I do accept that it is significantly different scenario with the left-ins and left-outs, including, as is now being suggested, that we accept left-in, left-out at each crossover. The way the development had been proposed, the reality was that irrespective of whether you had a no exit sign on South Street, everybody that wanted to go in that direction was just going to go there anyway. And that's also the reality in any case, no matter what you do, which is why the council staff, the engineers were saying, well, realistically, the only real way to resolve that site is to have the traffic medians extended to ensure that you couldn't do those right turn movements. I think with that scenario, the traffic for me is wearable in the sense of the in and out of the site, the access and egress to the site. The flip side of that, though, that we have to consider is the amenity impact that then subsequently causes. And the amenity impact would be significant because anyone turning left out into South Terrace will then, wanting to go north or east, will effectively do a rat run, or they'll do a U-turn at a particularly dangerous environment. There's not a lot of room to do a U-turn anywhere in South Terrace. The immediate, if you were heading south, if you came out of this development, you headed south and you wanted to go east back to South Street, and you thought, oh, I'll just turn left in the first street. Well, that's a no-through road. Turn left into the next street. Well, that's actually a really tight local traffic only kind of road. If you were to try and do it in the other direction, they're all local traffic, really skinny streets that are not really designed to accommodate sort of, rat running and getting back to where you want. So it would have a genuine amenity impact in my view. But I don't want to dwell on that because it's not, I don't think that's the major issue. For me, the major conversation that we should be having today is very much about what is the intent of the mixed use zone. And the intent is very well spelled out in the scheme. But the problem with the scheme, and has been mentioned by the staff as well, is it gets complicated when you start looking at what is the desired future character of a particular area. And that is the really crux thing here. The fact that this land use is an A land use that is only to be approved under special consideration and consultation. The fact that it is one of those doesn't mean that that use should be permitted in every mixed use zone. Most of the other mixed use zones in the city of Fremantle are what I would call highway environments, where you traditionally had kind of highway commercial, you had service stations, you've got car washes already in those environments. They are nodes of development rather than a strip, and they are trying to bring about residential development into tired, old commercial highway development kind of areas. This one in South Terrace is completely different. It is a predominantly residential area that was on a lot of corners on South Terrace, the old pubs, the old corner shops, the butcher shops, all of those sort of things. It is very much like a village high street, if I could call it that. And it's really important that we distinguish between what might be appropriate over on a highway commercial mixed use zone with a high volume of traffic and where virtually there's no residential versus what would be appropriate on this site in this type of mixed use zone. And I think that's really what most of the people who have put in objections are actually talking about. So the compatibility, so there are 5 descriptors of a mixed use zone. And the first one talks about the mix of compatible uses. Well, I just can't see how a car wash in what would otherwise be described as a high street village servicing the local community environment, which it does, how a car wash is compatible with that type of environment that is existing and is obviously being encouraged to be created. If you actually look at the mixed-use zone in South Terrace, it's not on every property all the way along. It's typically on those properties that were either already mixed use or already zero lot lined buildings that basically were, like the old pubs or whatever. So there are some that are old, there are some that are new, that put there in the 60s, there are some that were industrial and the like, but almost all of the mixed use zoning is on those sort of things. And the ones that are residential, that are just old houses, they're not zoned mixed use. So it's the sites that either can complement the existing character of those older buildings are zoned mixed use, and the sites that actually are those older buildings. And they're very typically zero lot lined buildings. So that is the intent of that mixed use zone. And I'm not sure it absolutely has to be written in every finite detail in a scheme, particularly in schemes now where it is difficult to really do that. You can't have a policy for every last individual site. We don't realistically do that. Perhaps there is a need to do a little bit more of it. The second one is, provide residential at the upper level. And there was some conjecture, I guess, by some people, including some of my colleagues at council, that meant that there had to be residential. It is very clear to me that this is just a descriptor of the overall zone, and that there is, as was pointed out by staff, there is no minimum or maximum intensity that is required. If we tried to focus on, minimum intensity is a requirement, we'd be chasing the wrong rabbit down the wrong hole. Because the reality is it's not about that, it's actually about the form. So when we consider the land use and the intensity of development on the site, it's actually the built form that is the most relevant. There are single story mixed use shops all the way along South Terrace, and that's fine. They're single use, that's not a problem, but they're all basically complying with the contributing to the character and the function of that area. So I don't think you can discount this development based on its intensity, but I think you do have to focus on its form. The third element of the mixed use zone, ensure future development within each of the mixed use zones is sympathetic with the desired future character of each area. Now, the future character this area is defined, at least in the scheme, as a heritage area. And I really fail to see when the officers are actually saying that their assessment is that it does have an impact on the heritage value of the South Fremantle heritage area, that you could classify it as sympathetic. Sympathetic is something that contributes. So something that it has an impact, even if it's a minor impact, and I would dispute that, I think it's a significant impact, but it's certainly not sympathetic to the character of this area. It wouldn't be a problem if it was in the other mixed use zones, and that can be demonstrated because those types of land uses are already in those zones. There is another mixed use zone a couple of 100 metres up South Street on the corner of Hampton Road, and if this application was in that location, again, it wouldn't really bat much of an eyelid. It's the location and the relationship to both the heritage houses and the South Terrace streetscape that is the thing that we really need to focus on. I guess the other things that are really important to say about this are the other impacts that it's going to have. Now, I know that the noise assessment is basically saying, well, based on an initial assessment, because they don't know the exact nature of the vacuums that they're going to use and the like, that an initial assessment is suggesting that it is compliant. But unfortunately, the way the noise regs in WA work is that they are very broad in their provision. And as was noted, they talk about influencing factors. So they make a bunch of assumptions that the background noise that will be generated at any given time will be allowed for in the assessment. But the reality is, and I know because I live in this area, at night time, it can be incredibly quiet. So those influencing factors are actually working against the actual impact, the actual amenity impact that this could have on that area. One of the things that was not dealt with and almost never is that patrons make noise. We had a car wash that was a 24-hour car wash that was approved in Hilton in a neighbourhood centre zone that caused enormous amenity impacts for residents in exactly the same sort of juxtaposition as is proposed in this case. And of course, the issue of people vacuuming their cars with the doors open and the radios blaring and having a great time is actually a real thing, but it's not assessed as part of noise assessments. So if this was in a building and it was fully contained and everything, and you could control that environment, that might be a different thing. But that's not what is proposed here. What's proposed here is something that you can realistically is incredibly difficult to control from an amenity impact. So while they might be able to buy the U-Butte vacuum that only makes half the noise of your leaf blower times 4, because there are 4 of them, that's not the only outdoor noise that is generated by an activity like this. And I would imagine the potential, particularly in an unsupervised environment, for that to occasionally get significantly out of control. So for those reasons, and primarily for the land use reasons, knock this one back. I'm not sure how when you go through all of the individual requirements of the mixed use zone, the definition of the zone, that you then get to a position to say, actually, if we just deal with each one individually, we can sort of tick that box, sort of, maybe. But that's really not what the issue is. We really need to be looking at the intensity of the increase in the activity. The previous site, I mean, the traffic guys, great. They think that they might know how the previous site was used. Well, having lived there in the 40 years in that area, there was almost zero. The amount of times that you would see a car going in that site or coming out of that site, or even a boat movement going in and out of that site. I sort of vaguely remember a couple of times in 40 years seeing a boat go in and out of that site. And almost always it's actually the person who operated that, he would go and buy boats and bring them to the site. It wasn't the sort of yard that the public were taking boats in and out of. He was typically doing all of that movement. And I know the one time I remember seeing him trying to bring a larger boat out, and he actually had someone out in the road stopping traffic. So I remember that quite clearly, because yes, it was a difficult movement, but there is no way that the movements that have existed on that site correlate in any way to what is being proposed. So there are significantly more movements coming in on that side. I would concede, and I think it is a fair assessment, that any development on that site would probably generate. I guess I expressed it before, is that if the site is developed in a way that people have familiarity with the environment that they're working in and driving in, that's one thing. But when it's just a site where you just come and wash your car and then you leave, and it's not, you're not doing that every day. You might be doing it once a week. I'm amazed that people do that, or once a year, and I'm even amazed that people do that. But it's not a familiar movement that people would be making. The land uses in that area, I mean, this is where, again, it has an impact. When you put a use like this in an area like that, for me, it blights the immediate area. It blights the potential to get the types of mixed use land uses that are compatible with each other and with the residential neighbourhood that they're trying to fit within. So when you put a land use like this, which is really something that belongs on a highway kind of site, you are basically blighting the potential and the capacity for those other activities to succeed. It was already difficult enough to get shops into the adjoining building. Those shops have only come recently. But if you then exacerbate that scenario, it actually makes it difficult for those types of activities, the desired types of compatible activities, to actually flourish. So you're actually putting a blight in there. And you could argue, well, you know, it's been blighted it's been a virtual vacant site or a low use site for a very, very long time. But then when it was first put in place, it probably was zoned appropriately for that use. The new zoning that exists now is actually trying to achieve something different. It's looking forward, not looking backwards. And I think it's really important that we try and respect that and actually look at and see on the ground what is the appropriate land use range for that area, and particularly what is the appropriate built form. I've always argued that if someone had come along and put a car wash in a building, fully contained in a building, and it went out to the street edge, I wouldn't be batting an eyelid, because the built form at least would be sympathetic to the built form that is being generated in the area. But that's not what's proposed. It's a suburban car wash environment that is so foreign to an old heritage area in South Fremantle. It's not on the edge, and it's not even, while it's in the edge of South Fremantle, the bit of Fremantle that's immediately north is part of the same precinct. And it just feels so foreign that it can't possibly be the type of land use that was envisaged to be compatible with the rest of the area. The last thing I would say is the point that was raised about whether or not this use would be allowed in a residential zone. That actually speaks to the fact that, again, if this was in a building and contained and it was, you didn't see the activity going on, you didn't hear it, you didn't have the light overspill, and it didn't create the kind of hole in the streetscape that it does. If that was the case, then it would probably be okay in terms of the immediately surrounding residents. But the reality is it's a use which is by itself in the open and projecting all of the issues that a car wash projects, and the immediate surrounding buildings, all of them are residential. And if this was in a residential zone, it just would not be permitted. So why do we assume that it has no amenity impact when everything around it is residential, and it has very little way of actually screening its form, its activity, its function, and all of the impacts? So it is like putting a car wash in a residential zone. I know it's zoned mixed use, but it is like putting a car wash in a residential zone. And clearly we would never do that, and we can't do that because the scheme prohibits it. So it's unfortunately the scheme rightly allows this as an A use, but it rightly allows it as an A use in a mixed use zone that is where this type of use is compatible, and this one is not that mixed use zone. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Van Doosen has seconded. You wish to...
Thank you, presiding member. Yes, I will speak on this one. Yeah, this one was a really tough one for me. But I will be supporting the recommendation of the BRA and of the council in this one to not support the land use and refuse the application. Yeah, a tough one, but just going through my decision making, just to clarify, the use not permitted, just on the land use alone, not permitted unless council has exercised its discretion and granted approval after advertising. So, and as the officer said, it's looking at not just exercising discretion based on such like the objectives of the zone, but also looking at its context and its setting, and whether it be appropriate in that location. And also I think we do need to give weight to the advertising submissions. I think when it's an A use, that really does need to be given weight in our decision making. And in this instance, it was advertised and we had 81 objections. Now, I wasn't at the council meeting. I understand there was a lot of residents there as well objecting to the development, and 81 submissions in the city of Fremantle is not a small amount for, especially for a car wash applicant, you know, a small commercial, a relatively small in scale commercial use in, you know, a mixed use zone where it is capable of approval. So I do give weight to the community's views on this one. But demonstrated, as been demonstrated by the applicant and our officers reporting and everyone, definitely and our scheme, it's capable of discretionary approval. But with this one, just looking at the location, as the applicant said as well, and it's sort of in the RA, our mixed use zone does allow for a variety of uses and flexible uses, and Andrew also mentioned a lot of our mixed use zones in the city of Fremantle are more highway commercial, and I do compare this site. I'm familiar with another site, it's zone mixed use on Hampton Road where there's an existing car wash, and I look at the car wash in that location and it's same zoning, but it is a highway commercial strip, and I would argue that's appropriate. Car wash is appropriate for that setting. This setting, however, we are surrounded by residential, and whilst capable of approval as an A use, it is an X use in the adjoining lots, which are very close proximity. This is not a big lot, or, you know, the setbacks to the adjoining residential properties are not far. And yeah, so I just felt the fact it is an X use in the adjoining properties is a consideration in this one. It just demonstrates it's not generally a use to be contemplated in a residential zone, but I do accept capable approval on this particular site. Yeah, and just looking at the same, so I accept, so, and then going through the objectives, I guess, as a starting point. Compatibility, yeah, it's not demonstrated to be incompatible. It's, you know, there's obviously what we like, or personally what I'd like to see and what others might like to see on the site, but I think they've demonstrated it's compatible with the site, or, you know, I'm satisfied with, I could lean that way. The second one on development will provide residential on the upper level, obviously doesn't satisfy that one. And whilst there's sort of a bit of flexibility to be applied in objectives, they're not scheme provisions, there's a clear intent and a desire for mixed use development if it's own mixed use. So I just sort of have that view. So, and the fact there's an objective there, it's something that, you know, a desirable outcome we would prefer for that site. And I think in that location would be appropriate if made feasible and, you know, was put forward by the applicant. I think a preferred outcome would be a mixed use development on a bit of a gateway landmark site on the corner of South Terrace and South Street. Yes, and the key one for me, as Andrew sort of talked to, ensure the future development within each mixed use is sympathetic with the desired future character of the area. Now, desired future character is sort of, it's not defined anywhere in the scheme. So we look to or in the planning framework. So we look to the strategy. I think it's not really specific at the site. We look for the heritage policies and what have you. It's in a heritage area. I'm satisfied with the design that they've addressed. You know, they've sought to address the heritage area and the character of the area with the built form design, and it's supported by our heritage officers. However, desired future character, I think also something that should be considered, as well as just the context, what's existing around there, which to me, this is not consistent with. It's a commercial use, a traffic generating commercial use, a noise generating, and there will be amenity impacts in a residential area. But also desired future character arguably could be defined by the people who live around there. What's their desire for that area? They live there. Well, we've got 81 people who live in the area, which is, well, it's 81 people. That's a large number of submissions to object to a development in Fremantle, and they're all saying they don't desire this for their area. So that's, yeah, that's where I landed on that one. So I feel it's inconsistent with that. The other ones, ensure development not detrimental to the amenity of the adjoining owners and residential properties. Of course, there will be an amenity impact, and I think all development has an impact on amenity. I think this one I am satisfied from a technical perspective, everything's been addressed, the traffic planning and from our officers as well, and the acoustic matters. It all can be, the sort of technical aspects have been addressed. So I'm okay with the amenity impacts. I think we can manage that. And actually gave me a bit of comfort knowing that the adjoining owner did support it. How long they're going to be there, and the next, residents would just have to sort of deal with what's there, I guess. And then the heritage element, it's not a heritage site and it's supported by heritage officers. So yeah, I'm fine with that one. So yeah, this a tough one, but yeah, on balance, considering its context and its setting, doesn't meet all the objectives, and also the number of submissions, and also noting the council unanimously have recommended refusal. So, and that was a unanimous decision from council. I wasn't at the meeting, but that was a clear. So the community does not support this application, and obviously from a technical perspective you can support it. It's all been ticked off by officers and the applicant's consultant team. So that's where I am. So I won't be supporting this application today. I just would also make comment that should the DAP agree with us not to refuse it, I just, in terms of the minutes and what have you, we might like to discuss the specific reasons for refusal. I'm not sure everything in the sort of recommended, I'm not sure how that all gets published, but the recommendations from, I don't align with all the views of what the council put forward as reasons, but we could discuss that. And then if this is my opportunity, I guess, one opportunity to speak. So if the DAP should support this application, I would seek to have, I do support the officer's recommended conditions.
Just on that, councillor, if this motion for refusal is lost and we move to an alternate motion, you'll have.
Then I can speak on that. Okay, yeah. Thank you very much. All right, that's all from me. So that's my position. Thank you.
Great. And just on the reasons, you'll have the ability if we
get to that decision. Yes, I speak on that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, mover and seconder have spoken. Does any other panel member wish to speak for or against the refusal motion?
Look, I'm inclined the other way. I think this can be approved. I think that the general technical concerns regarding acoustics and traffic and so on have been addressed, and we can go into that in a fair bit of detail, and certainly that's been drilled down in detail, not only in the RAO but today. And I think in all of those regards, the impact on amenity as a result of what possibly might there be from a nuisance and noise point of view and a traffic point of view have been satisfactorily dealt with. If we're looking then at what the land use might be, does a car wash fit in with this general environment? Well, the problem is that we have a lot of trouble defining what the desired future character of this area might be. Now, we might have some personal opinions as to what we might want it to be, but that's quite different to what is in the city's documents and in the city's policies and so on. So it's not really defined. We're in an area which is actually quite a low density zoning, and there's no idea that it's going to be substantially rezoned or redeveloped or upzoned or whatever. We're not in much transition. Does this as a fairly low scale and I must say objectively low impact land use, which has been assessed by the city's officers with a result that it has minor impact on the heritage value of the precinct and is consistent with the zone objectives. There is very little reason for us not to approve this. It's on a busy intersection. It looks to be a fairly logical use for this location. Clearly, it's a commercial decision as to whether a car wash there is viable or not. That's not our business. There is nothing in here which would cause us to say, well, it is a contemplated use in the scheme. The issues that you might look at in exercising discretion as to whether it is acceptable or not have been really addressed, and I think objectively and certainly from the judgment of the city officers have been satisfactorily addressed. So for that reason, there's really no reason why it's for us not to approve it. And for that reason, I would vote for the alternative motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Go ahead, Member Lafanti.
Thank you. From my perspective, I essentially don't support a refusal. From my perspective, when I am drilled down into, I suppose, the key commentary that's been discussed today, the land use, the future character of the area, and the objectives of the zone, what I see is a mix of uses that include quite a broad range of uses, industrial uses. There's showrooms, there is a series of service industry activities. There is a range of uses that are not so inconsistent or different from this use to say that that the site should be more considered as residential. From my perspective, it's not residentially zoned. It might adjoin residentially zoned. It's definitely not that zoning. The scheme, its own provisions, has a very broad range of uses. And as far as I'm concerned, when I look at the scheme listing of uses, they're quite significant. I just can't see how that cannot be considered a key matter when determining appropriateness of land use. The other elements from my perspective is when we move to desired future character, I would agree that commentary around what that desired future character is not provided for us in a document that's been approved or adopted by the city. But I draw some of my commentary about what we have in the adopted document, and the scheme itself provides some of that. The scheme says we do want a broad range of uses in that area. They're not narrowing it down. Those broad range of uses, not only in terms of the ones I've spelt out, but they include uses such as restaurants and entertainment activities, which are also noise generating activities. So when I look at the range of uses that the scheme itself identifies, it has a mix of uses by both the type, potential noise impacts, form and scale. So I see that the scheme does provide some information because of its structure to what is considered desired as we have in the current framework. I note and have given the due regard to the concerns of the residents, and as has been explored today, those technical aspects of noise and particularly around noise impact have been thoroughly discussed and as far as I'm concerned, been satisfied as being addressed. I also am of the view that there are legal controls to manage noise that exceeds those requirements, and they are in the remit of the local government, and there are legal processes, and I'm sure that the council has the necessary equipment that would enable noise to be verified on development, whether it is or isn't complying it. There are actions that can be taken as a result of that. But from the material we have here, I'm not seeing that the amenity impact, such as particularly noise, is so significant that would cause this development to be inconsistent with the character of the area. And I've already spoken to the issues around a range of uses, and some of those are very noisy uses that I've already indicated. I'm also satisfied that the heritage consideration, which speaks to form and scale, which also forms part of desired future character, has given a consideration. It did talk about the scale of the development. It talked about the materials and finishes. We've heard today, and we have in our material, the changes that were made to the form and scale to incorporate a more appropriate physical form. And in that particular case, I think it has shown due regard for the locational context. I'm also of the view that the issues around traffic and movement, as have been said already, have been thoroughly evaluated and examined. We have received additional material today's meeting around the left in, left out, and that there are some controls, potential controls that would manage traffic in terms of at the immediate intersection. I will go on to say that in terms of any of the inner urban areas, and Fremantle is an urban area, an intense urban area, there are movements that local community will be familiar with. We have had material that facilities of this nature do generate clientele from local. It's not exclusively local, but it does draw from local as well. So from my perspective, I don't see this as so inconsistent with the range of, with the nature of the residential area and the broader area. And I don't see this as being something that is inconsistent with the surrounding area. These are facilities that are also used, as Marie said, by the local community. I'm also of the view that with the street itself and the interface with the street, again, this was a significant issue. That issue is left unresolved in the strategic documents that might provide some further information for us. We've had clarity that there are no plans that we've been able to be advised of that relate to any streetscape works or changes within the actual street environment that is looking towards something quite different than the types of uses that the zone would allow. As far as I'm concerned, the proposal does sit appropriately within the zone. It does meet the objectives as written. The development impacts are addressed, and the form and scale has had modifications to incorporate an interface with the street that is appropriate. The zoning itself does allow for uses that have wider frontage, open frontage areas. So again, I don't see that this development sits so inconsistently with the desired future character or is so far removed from the objectives of the zone and the planning provisions. I can't support a refusal for the reasons I've given.
Thank you, Member Lafanti. Look, I acknowledge the perspective that has been brought to this, the local perspective by the councillors of the City of Fremantle. I guess though, from a planning perspective, I would struggle to justify voting for a refusal of the application. Instead, I do foreshadow that I would move the alternate recommendation for approval if the refusal motion is lost. And I think I'm going to focus, because it's already been said, a lot of what I think has already been said, I'm going to focus initially more on the reasons for refusal that have been used in the responsible authority report, and I'll talk to those a little bit. I don't think it's an application based on what it's not, what it could be instead, or whether it would be better suited to a different site or in another location. Our role is to consider whether the development before us would be appropriate or acceptable on the site for which it is proposed. Therefore, I don't agree that locating the development outside a neighbourhood centre or a commercial or industrial zone is a reasonable or valid reason for refusal, and nor is the suggestion the use would be better located in one of those areas. That may well be, but it's not a sound reason to refuse this application. Similarly, having a detrimental impact on the viability of nearby mixed-use development is not a valid planning reason. Even if it was a valid reason for refusing the application, the comment is speculative. There's no evidence in the report for this panel to consider that would back that comment up. The mixed-use zoning applicable to the site provides for the inclusion of residential development. It doesn't mandate it. So to refuse the application based on the non-inclusion of a residential component is simply, in my view, without a planning basis. And to suggest that because a use isn't permitted on adjoining properties, it would therefore automatically have a negative impact on those properties, in my view, isn't entirely accurate. The fact that the use can be contemplated in the mixed-use zone and that a mixed-use zoning has been applied to this site means that the proposed use can be considered on merit, not discounted simply because it's a next use on neighbouring sites. The city's heritage officers, heritage architects, have concluded that the amended design is largely sympathetic with the general build form of the heritage area. So I can't support any reason for refusal that appears without evidential basis, and that contradicts that expert opinion. The remaining reasons for refusal are based on concerns about noise and light spill and activity outside of acceptable hours, and concerns about traffic and pedestrian safety. And in my view, these are issues that we should consider in deciding whether to exercise our discretion in approving an A land use. But on the view that these issues have been appropriately considered and responded to via additional information provided by the applicant, conditions of approval suggested by city staff. The acoustic report concludes the levels and the noise regs will be met, subject to some mitigation measures, and these have been included as conditions by the city staff. Light spill needs to comply with Australian standards, similarly covered by a condition recommended by staff. I agree that it's reasonable to limit activity outside of reasonable hours, and therefore I support time-limited activity, and I'll talk to that more if we get an opportunity to consider a motion for approval. In terms of pedestrian safety, I'm of the view that this proposal poses no greater risk to pedestrian safety than other proposals for the site could and would. Traffic movements onto and off the site would largely be the same, with the same considerations irrespective of the land use proposed. Therefore, given the information in the report and the technical attachments, given what we've heard through submissions and through the deputations and questioning today, I'm just not comfortable refusing the application, and certainly not for the reasons outlined at the front of the RA. I will speak to more specific issues like traffic, ingress and egress, if afforded to via consideration of an alternate motion should this one not get up. With that, I will hand back to Councillor Sullivan as mover to close debate.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Just in summary, I would, and having listened to the other members of the panel, I totally acknowledge that the scheme is not brilliant at describing what the future desired character of the area is. If it had, I don't think there would be any debate in this matter, because I know what that desired character would be, and it's certainly not for a car wash. But as the presiding member pointed out, that's not written down anywhere. What is written down is that it's a heritage area, and it is required to be consistent with the rules about heritage areas. And it might be the only element that actually does give us some guidance. The other areas that are zoned mixed use are not heritage areas. This area is, and this part of the scheme and reference to the heritage area policies is relevant. And the LPP 3.6 on heritage areas requires that development is undertaken in a sympathetic manner, which does not cause loss of heritage loss of historic cultural heritage significance for the area, not just for the site, but for the area. And I don't believe that any fair assessment of this form of development, not the land use, but the form of development, can actually be said to be sympathetic to the heritage area and can be considered to be not causing a loss of cultural significance in the area. Now, the summation of the officers that I read in terms of heritage, yes, it will have only a minor impact on the heritage value of the South Fremantle heritage area. Only a minor impact, some impact. Some impact, minor impact, does not sound like a development form that is sympathetic. It's not saying it has to have little or none. It's saying it has to be sympathetic. So normally when we look at clauses like that, for example, for demolition, if something had little or no heritage significance, then it would be allowed to be demolished. But if it had some significance, it wouldn't be allowed to be demolished. The terminology here is basically saying it's not only whether it has some impact on the heritage. It's actually saying that it has to be sympathetic, and it's actually saying that it should cause no loss of historic cultural heritage significance. So if your assessment is that a car wash in South Fremantle Heritage Area is sympathetic and not causing any loss of heritage character of the area, then that's kind of a pretty amazing statement. So, car washes proliferating everywhere in South Fremantle in mixed-use zones would absolutely destroy the heritage significance of the area. And so I just want you to, irrespective of the fact that all those other points that have been made are probably reasonable in a sense of a pure planning perspective, because it's not defined what the future character of that area is. The heritage area zoning or layer over that whole area does define what should be happening. And that is why a car wash in this precinct, in this mixed use zone, is not appropriate, whereas a car wash in all of the other mixed use zones is. And I rest my case on that, and I'd be very disappointed if the heritage area is going to be considered in this way into the future. Thank you.
Thank you for closing, Councillor Sullivan. I will now move to put the recommendation for refusal to the vote. All those in favour? Against? That motion is lost. I will therefore suggest that we bring to the table the alternate motion provided at the back of the Responsible Authority report for approval subject to a range of conditions. I'm happy to move that recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, John. Before speaking to the alternate motion, I suggest I'd like to move a number of amendments to the conditions. The first one is to delete condition 4 as it duplicates condition 2. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Thank you. I don't wish to speak to it. It's an exact duplicate of condition 2, is therefore unnecessary. Does any other member wish to speak for or against that amendment? No? All right, let's vote on that amendment. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Then I would seek to amend condition 6 relating to the lighting plan to include the words "to the satisfaction of the city" at the end of the condition. Do I have a seconder for that? The reason for that is there can be differences in opinion about whether light spill onto adjoining properties is occurring because of the subject. It's very clear who the determining party will be in assessing whether light spill is an issue or not. Does any other member wish to speak for or against that amendment? No, let's put that amendment to the vote. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Then I'd seek to amend condition 8 to add the following wording to the end of the condition. The approved materials, colours and finishes shall thereafter be implemented and maintained in perpetuity unless otherwise agreed by the City of Fremantle. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Member Lafanti. The reason for this wording is to ensure that the approved materials, colours and finishes, because this condition deals simply with getting them approved. This ensures that the approved materials, colours and finishes will be implemented and maintained for the life of development unless otherwise agreed by the city in the future. And that takes account of scenarios where in the future upgrades or maintenance needs to take place. Perhaps the exact same colours or materials may not be available, but at least the city will be able to have a say in that future work. Does any other member wish to speak for or against that amendment? No? All right, let's put that to a vote. All those in favour? Carried. Mm. 10, that deals with the access and egress. to pick up what's been discussed today, to enable left in and left out turns out of the site onto South Terrace and left in and left out turns into the site from South Street. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Thank you, Member Lafanti. I've heard all the conversation today about the fact that any restrictions on movement cause other, sometimes unintentional issues. And I've heard the arguments that the right turn into the site from South Street should not be an issue. There's a small element of risk, but it's a risk that is applicable to any intersection and so on. I think that this is a suitable compromise, one which the city hasn't had time to assess, but they will be able to assess minor changes to layout and curbing as part of detailed design processes. And I note that the applicant has agreed to this compromise position. So my view is I think it does reduce risk by eliminating right turns, and it still allows for the functioning of the development on the site. Does any other member wish to speak for or against? Yep.
I will vote for this. I just need to say I'm a little bit uncomfortable in that my preference would have been to stick with what the applicant was suggesting in the first place. I actually think it is slightly lower risk. I suspect that would, if I'd moved that, I don't think I would have had a seconder, so I wouldn't have pursued it very, very strongly. But it is worth noting, though, that this is a compromise. It still might have some unintended consequences which might need to be addressed, and that I'm thinking particularly in terms of U-turns and rat runners and so on, which the original proposal would have obviated to a much greater extent. I think, however, given all of that, the number of traffic movements we're talking about here is so vanishingly small in number that the practical problem with this is really non-existent. So I think it's a reasonable compromise, albeit a compromise.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak for or against Member Lafanti?
I'll speak on this amendment. My perspective, I think the solution for left in, left out is both streets is appropriate. Any changes that essentially move from an all-way movement to some form of restricted movement has some consequences, and it is about managing and balancing the risk there. From my perspective, given the proximity of the intersection, I think that the controls left in and left out are appropriate in this particular context, and that movement in and around the area is a requirement to be done in a safe manner, and this is not uncommon to have restrictions to right movements near intersections, and it happens in many places around the metropolitan area, and people find an appropriate way to safely take the manoeuvres to end where they want to be.
Thank you. Any other member wish to speak for or against this amendment? Councillor Van Dawson.
Thank you, presiding member. I will support the amendment, but I am just a little concerned. The unintended consequences of how it will function a little bit on site. We haven't been cars coming in and then having to go around. So if they're coming in off South Terrace left in, they have to sort of go past the vacuum bays and out that way. I think the condition posed by the officers in the RA in the alternate recommendation sort of, it gives a clear sort of vehicle movements clearly go through the site one way, and I feel like this one, if people are coming in, such as on South Terrace, and then having to go around, I don't know that this. I just wanted to sort of voice my concerns about how it will work on site with different vehicles going different ways, trying to access different, car bays or vacuum bays versus the actual wash operations. But yeah, I trust the risk is, in terms of the surrounding area and safety is pretty low. So I just trust it. They'll sort themselves out. But yeah, that was just my comment on this.
Thank you. Any other member wish to speak for or against the amendment? I might close then on the amendment just to make it clear that this amendment doesn't need to be supported. If it's lost, then the other panel members are very welcome to move an alternate that they prefer or revert back to the officer's recommendation. So me simply moving the amendment doesn't mean it's the only option. With that, I will put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Those are all the amendments I have, so I'll revert to my commentary on this alternate motion. I think given the extra detail provided in response to our Reg 13 request for information and information provided in response to our many questions today, I will support the alternate motion for approval. Do I think it would be a better outcome for the site and the neighbours if the proposal was for a high quality architecturally designed building containing some cool cafes and boutique shops with much needed residential accommodation above? Absolutely. But we're not being asked to consider that. We're being asked to consider a different proposal that in my view would still likely benefit not only nearby residents but the broader community of Fremantle. And I agree with the outcomes of the staff assessment against clause 67 of the regs. And I agree with their assessment of the objectives against the objectives of the mixed use zone and their conclusions that the proposed land use is an acceptable one for the site. I do acknowledge the concerns raised in the submissions received. But many of these were not issues that this panel or other planning decision makers should reasonably use as reasons for refusal. And the other issues that I feel the community have raised, I think, have been appropriately addressed by the applicant or included as conditions of approval. So not responding in a way to those submissions by refusing it doesn't mean we've not taken account of them. They're an important input into the planning decision making process, but they are not the only input. We are required to look at a number of inputs, and that is what we've done today. The applicants have taken on board the feedback from the city about build form and the need for the proposal to pay closer attention to LPP 3.6 and to sit more comfortably within its heritage context. And I think they've made appropriate changes in response to that. And I'm heartened by the fact that qualified heritage architects acknowledge that and have supported that. In my view, the proposal certainly is an improvement on what's currently on site and on some of the other non-residential buildings in the vicinity. The immediately adjoining neighbours to the south will be shielded to a large degree by the existing boundary walls on their site. And we heard today that the design of the car wash will further mitigate impacts to the gap that exists between those walls. I'm also a note that the immediate neighbour to the east supports the proposal. I don't think the proposed use is of a nature and intensity to cause undue amenity impacts to neighbours. It's located on an intersection of two roads, which generate their own traffic noise and in an area where there are already other non-residential uses. By virtue of its operational arrangements and physical site constraints, the development really can't accommodate more customers than those which can queue on the site and park. That in itself limits the numbers of people and cars accessing the site at any one time. The closed areas of the car wash bays are designed to mitigate the worst of the noise, and the numbers of cars entering and exiting the site are arguably less than what could occur if the site was more intensively developed, potentially even with a D or a P use. And so I think that should be noted. In terms of pedestrian traffic safety, I'm of the view that the proposal won't have any greater impact on pedestrian safety than other developments which could be approved for the site. And we've talked enough about access and egress. I won't go there anymore. I do agree with the city's condition to limit operating hours instead of allowing the facility to run 24/7. Again, this is just a personal view, but I don't think it's necessary to wash your car or bath your dog in the wee hours on a site close to residential neighbours. As mentioned, there are other sites that if you really feel that need at 3 in the morning, you can visit them, albeit you may have to drive a little further away. I don't, however, agree with the proposal to limit the hours to 7 p.m. because I think there needs to be some flexibility afforded to people that may work later hours. And with that, I will put that aside and I will see if the seconder wishes to speak to the alternate motion.
Look, I'll be brief because I think I've said most of it before. I think this is a land use which is certainly contemplated in this area. I do note that the heritage form has been assessed in some sort of detail, and the RIR says that the building has been modified, followed after the building with the current building form. It is now largely sympathetic with the general built form character of the heritage area. So I think we can go beyond a bit beyond being more than minor impact. It is largely sympathetic as far as the RAR is concerned. I do think we also need to take note of the fairly low impact and the low volume of this. I mean, we're talking about at peak hour, 1 car every 8 or 9 minutes coming into the site. That's not a lot of traffic movement. It's enough time to not only make a cup of tea, but also to drink it and have some time left over. It really is quite a low impact and low volume sort of operation here. And I think any of the concerns, which are reasonable ones about acoustics and so on, of those sorts of uses, they've been well and truly addressed. I think the acoustic report is a good and thorough one, and it puts in and it ensures that the sorts of concerns that there might be for any of these have been properly addressed. Similarly with traffic, we've talked about that in some detail. It is a logical land use on an intersection of 2 busy roads in a fairly low scale area. As I said before, that we might have some ambitions for other uses of the site or how the general precinct might be, really is a bit irrelevant because we're really talking about what is before us in the first instance and what the planning scheme allows in the second instance, and in those cases, in each case, it's consistent. So for those reasons, I think we can approve this with the conditions that we've got.
Thank you, Member Syme. Does any other member wish to speak for or against this alternate motion? Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to point out condition 18 first. Condition 18 actually talks about hours of operation 6:30 to 10:30. I did hear conversation that the suggestion was that be brought back to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and the reason being obviously the noise regs. I won't move that. I wanted to move what the council had done, which was actually suggest that 7 p.m. should be the limit of hours of operation.
Let's deal with that as the amendment and then you can talk.
Yeah, so I will first of all go with that amendment of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that amendment? Thank you, Councillor Van Dawson. Back to you, Councillor Sullivan.
Presiding member. I do point out that when this first went to council, the approval motion was put first, and council moved an amendment to make it till 7 p.m. It did so on the basis of the very reasonable concerns of the community that uncontrolled nighttime activity outside of the venue in the vacuum areas and the like is not something that is easily managed. I know that from personal experience of other car washes that are right next door to residential buildings, where it's not so much the noise of the machine that is the disruptor, it's actually the activity that occurs in that environment and it is the noise that's generated from within the cars through their stereo systems and also from just the general conversation. They have been well known to be congregation areas for people wanting to wash their cars as part of an activity in itself, not just the convenience or the utilitarian use of the car wash. It becomes a congregation point and it becomes a noise generating activity, which is almost impossible to control through the regulations, because it's not from machines, it's not from activity that is specifically generated by the proponent, it's generated by their customers, and there is no management of that. So that is why, particularly in this zone, which is predominantly surrounded by residential activity, it is not an appropriate place to go beyond 7 p.m. And I would ask you to give consideration to making that amendment.
Thank you. As seconded to the amendment, do you wish to speak, Councillor Van Dawson?
No, I have nothing to add. Happy for it to go to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak for or against that amendment? Member Lafanti.
I understand the concerns raised, although I don't support a close period at 7. I would support an open period at 7 and a closed period later. The reasons for my position are, again, the site does allow for a mix of uses. This use is part of that mix. The location is on a busy intersection, which already has a level of noise with vehicles slowing down, stopping to go through the intersection. The configuration of the site, particularly in relation to the vacuum bays, located towards the road again, which is near the intersection, having a wall for a level of protection, and the activities that can generally occur in these mixed areas also, as already indicated, do allow for activities that continue later into the evening. There are mechanisms to deal with noise, and if it is creating massive problems, then the matters can be raised with the owner of and operator of it. But given the treatments that are contained within the proposal location of those facilities and its locational context, and its zoning, I don't see the need to cease the operations at 7, which does seem actually very early from my perspective in this particular location.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak for or against this amendment?
Yes, look, I agree with those sentiments entirely. There's no purpose to us. We've got evidence that we can satisfactorily, from a noise point of view, operate until at least 10 or 10:30, at least 10 anyway. And the physical location of any of these nuisance noise sources or additional nuisance noise sources, particularly those vacuum areas, really are pretty much acoustically isolated from any area. They're surrounded either by the building or noise walls or whatever, and they're on the main road. So I see no purpose at all in needlessly restricting the commercial use of this site. If it's going to be a car wash, it should be allowed to be a car wash reasonably.
Thank you. Look, I'll speak very briefly. I would probably support shifting the 6:30 to 7 a.m, but equally I don't support the restriction at 7. I think it unnecessarily impacts the ability of people to attend this business during the week who may work and may only get home to go and fetch their dog or bring their car to utilise the facility. And for the reasons mentioned by the other members, I don't think that the amenity impacts between 7 and say 10 o'clock are going to be such that it would justify limiting the hours to those. So I won't support the amendment. Councillor Sullivan, though, as mover of the amendment, would you like to wish to close on the amendment?
Thank you, presiding member. I emphasise that other land uses in the area that do go into the evening, and there are many. There are restaurants and pubs, and I concede all of those things, and but they're all managed. They're all managed sites, and they all have management plans, typically where someone takes responsibility for the activity of their customers. This does not, and that is the difference. And it is in that that residential zone. So because it is different, I would argue that we need to apply restricted hours of operation that don't take it past that 7 p.m. The 7 p.m. is when there is an expectation in the noise regs that you start getting into that nighttime activity where, peaceful enjoyment of your individual house, the noise levels does need to come down from surrounding activities. And I think that's what I'm trying to reflect is that's the period of time where people would prefer there not to be the kind of noise that sounds like four leaf blowers going on the neighbour's backyard for 3 hours or 3.5 hours into the evening. If my neighbour did that 7 days a week, I would be absolutely furious. And I think the people that live around this area have an expectation for that as well. But I'm particularly concerned because of previous experience, massive feud that went on for years with patron noise from car washes being the fundamental problem and an almost impossible element to deal with using the regulations as they stand. And there are plenty of other car washes in the area that provide the service into the evening. Not every car wash in an area needs to provide the exact same service. This one in its more residential environment, which is unlike some of the other ones or most of the other ones, does need to be limited. So I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. We're going to vote on this amendment now, but I do need to, from a procedural point of view, point out that if this amendment is lost, it does not negate the ability of a member who has not spoken yet to move an alternate, a different alternate. Yeah. So let us put that amendment to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment to restrict hours from 7 to 7? Or against? That amendment is lost. Councillor Sullivan, you were in the process of speaking to the main motioning.
Yes, thank you. If with your indulgence, move a slightly different version of it, which is the till 10 p.m. rather than 10:30 p.m, because that is what the applicant was indicating that they were comfortable with. So I'll move that as an amendment. I don't have a problem with this. Can I just check with you that you are seeking to move an amendment to condition 18 that enables or that restricts the operating hours from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m? I'm actually comfortable with 6:30, so I'm just going to seek to change the 10:30 to 10.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Van Dawson. Councillor Sullivan, do you wish to speak any further on that?
No, look, I would just say I was actually surprised why 10:30 kept coming up, because 10 p.m. is the change in the noise time. From a management point of view, if there is a requirement for our staff to go out there and check noises, the last thing they want to have to do is check the noise levels before 10 and then check the different noise levels after 10 because they are different compliance. So 10 p.m. is very often written into these things specifically because it reflects the noise regulations, and I would suggest that's what should happen here.
Thank you. Councillor Van Dawson, do you wish to add to that?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak for or against that amendment? All right, let's put that amendment to the vote. We are voting to amend condition 18 to restrict the operating hours between 6:30 and 10 p.m. instead of 10:30. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Sullivan, on the motion in front of you.
Thank you, presiding member. I mean, obviously, I won't be supporting the car wash, but I guess I've given all of my reasons for that. I do concede that the scheme is not ideal in describing what the desired character of the area should be, but I think sometimes in planning applications, common sense does need to come into it, and you can't describe every last element of what's required. I totally accept all of the arguments that we can't aim for high bars in planning. We can only really see if something is compliant. Totally accept that argument. I totally accept the argument that an underdevelopment of a site is not a reason for refusal. My only concerns have always been that the land use was not compatible and that the form of development in the way it's presented, and if all of these setbacks and completely inconsistent with the form of either houses or other mixed-use developments on the village high street, because of all of those reasons, it is actually inconsistent. So I cannot support the development in the form that it is proposed, and that was always my primary concern, is the form over the land use.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak for or against the motion for approval? Member Lefant.
I will speak for the motion for approval. I am supportive of the proposal, having given due regard to the planning framework and the submissions presented in the material, as well as the presentations in today's meeting and the discussion today. As I have indicated earlier, I am of the view that the land use is appropriate as in this location, and therefore it's appropriate to be considered as a discretionary use with the exercise of discretion by this panel in that regard. I have talked about the reasons for that, which include the locational context, the site's zoning, the commentary provided in relation to the building form and scale and materials, external materials, the mix of land uses that are contained within the scheme that also sit, that move towards my position on the suitability of the land use, as well as the included technical elements relating to the management of noise, both in the design through the treatment of the building, has a large parapet wall at the rear of the building and has wings to that parapet wall, which also address the noise, as well as including noise walls along the boundary, although one frontage is set in to give landscaping. So from my perspective, the proposal, both in terms of land use and form, are appropriate in this context. That has been reinforced today through the discussions we've had, commentary from technical officers in the report and in the submissions today, in the discussion today, and I'm formed the view that this is a matter that is appropriate within this context, can be addressed and is conditioned appropriately to address the elements that we've been discussing. I'm also satisfied that the access to the site is reasonable, left in, left out, given its location on the intersection, to minimise impacts in the movement at the intersection, but to allow reasonableness of movement around the site. As I've already indicated today, this site is not so unusual that elements such as this don't occur that are similar in other areas, and community do need to navigate intensification of an area and do so in a safe manner when they're driving. I don't see this as particularly complex movement of left in, left out with, given its location at the intersection. Overall, I'm satisfied that this proposal is appropriate and is supported.
Thank you. I believe we've all had an opportunity to speak, so I don't wish to add anything in closing. I will therefore put the motion to approve to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried 3-2. Thank you. Moving on then to item 4, Form 2 DAP applications. There are nil on the agenda today. Similarly, there are no Section 31 SAT reconsiderations. Part C, other business, SAT applications and Supreme Court appeals. All these applications that are currently listed on the DAP website, none of which relate to the City of Fremantle. With that, I will close the meeting at 1:10 p.m. Thank you to our City of Fremantle members for your participation. Thank you to the other panel members. Thank you to the deputies for coming along, and to Chloe, who has assisted us greatly, and thank you to the Secretariat staff as usual. Good afternoon.